Welcome to RPG Reanimators, a podcast for GMs where we dissect horror scenarios and offer our experiences and advice to reanimate them at the table. I'm Nathan.
I'm Alex.
I'm Holly.
I'm Lex.
I'm Fiona.
Well, today we're joined by Fiona, the game master from What Am I Rolling, a twice monthly one shot podcast. Fiona also hosts TLDR TTRPG, got a one, and co hosts the DM's Book Club. Welcome, Fiona.
Hi, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much.
Of course. So let's see who's in the waiting room. Today we're consulting on an acute case of teaching RPGs and safety tools. We'll discuss lessons we've learned from our games and offer our best advice on how to try addressing this issue at your table. Now, let's begin our consultation. So, Fiona, I think I got to you originally through the TLDR TTRPG series.
Mhm.
How would you describe that and what brought you to create that?
Yeah, thank you. So Too Long Didn't Read TTRPGs is a basically an accountability stream where I sit down for like an hour or two and read through an RPG that's caught my sort of eye. And I always joke that either it's from the bookshelf of doom, which is just packed full of these hardbacks, or the Google Drive of mystery where you go, what is that misnamed, like, underscore one underscore final? And I did it because a couple of reasons. So obviously I have various projects that are TTRPG related, but it's very rare nowadays that I get to sit down and just read an RPG rather than just do it for content. And I'd seen a lot of articles talking about like the importance of like when you're reviewing stuff, not only reading it but also play testing it. And I felt that was a bit unfair, actually. Like again, I'm not saying that if you've got the privilege of having a group that is willing to try new games and meet regularly and then willing to share their thoughts and feelings and the GMing responsibilities, my goodness, stay with that group for as long as you can. Because I felt like, there's always amazing, cool indie RPG games out there that we just don't get to hear about. And you don't, you talk about amazing times you had at conventions and stuff. Like I did Gen Con and people were like, oh, I play this really random game that I would not have done normally. And so I thought, well, I should, put my sort of money where my mouth is. I have all these TTRPGs that I just don't read. I just go, that sounds great. And then find it 6 months later under various folders. And I thought, why don't I just, again, categorize them all, like actually go through the files, get rid of the duplicates, etc. Have my sort of spreadsheet, and then just randomly generate a number. And go, cool. Today I'm going to look at this one. It's exactly that acquisition disorder Alex has said in the chat there, and I'm like, yeah, pretty much. It's the new way of doing it in the sense of like before it used to be Kickstarters and those physical orders, and now it's just PDF after PDF after PDF. But yeah, so that was the main reason, was I wanted to read through these TTRPGs of like ones that I found interesting or something that had caught my eye about it. But then as I started getting into it, it also helped me with sort of sight reading and speaking aloud, because one thing I'd like to do is to do more like voiceover work and do more character stuff. Again, everyone here I'm sure has done lots of TTRPG like GMing and stuff like that. So you're thinking, God, the goblin's going to come out for the third time. It's going to be a slightly different goblin, etc. But like being able to sort of sight read and think about how you're pronouncing and describing stuff. I just thought that was always just important, especially if you're going to do auditions and stuff. And then when I got into it, I realized that again, from my background of not only running a lot of games and putting together stuff for content, but actually because I originally was a content developer for a university and about streamlining content for the web. Certainly during COVID, where we're trying to get all these classes online and people wanting to be able to read it and having to get through the mud and mire of mostly medical texts, I kind of realized that actually it's so important to have quick starts and samples and books in general for PDFs to be accessible, but not only just in the way of like alt text and like visibility, but also like how are we reading these things? Like if you're giving this to a player to read, how easy is it for them to go, oh, this is the main mechanic? How do we go through this? So like I always say, I give a critique. Because again, I'm not a game designer, but I always think, oh, this could be improved if it just did this, this, and this. So yeah, that's how Too Long Didn't Read TTRPGs came about, roughly about a year or so ago.
That leads beautifully into my question, actually. I also really love to teach newbies RPGs. What are some of the like common challenges that you've faced introducing new folks to RPGs? And do you have any strategies to help with that?
I see. This is an interesting question because I feel like I'm challenged all the time on stuff. I think I can give an example of something recently. So I've recently introduced Blades of the Dark to a group of who are not, I wouldn't say, I say newbies, but to newbies to Forge in the Dark system compared to RPGs. So they're very used to role playing and doing, the great big things. But then a new system which is very different. It's more proactive. I'm asking the players what are they doing before I tell them what the challenge is. They're really struggling with it, and they're not enjoying it as a result. And so, yeah, obviously, when you have people who are new to a system but are excited to tell a story, I'm finding it myself even a challenge. So I'm having to unlearn a few things I would normally do. There's always that thing about like narrowing down the options, talking through like what their characters would do. But when you have stuff like, say, Blades of Dark, which is all about action, heist, your characters are competent. What do they do? They've already planned for this. Sometimes there's that freezing up part.
Right. Analysis paralysis.
Exactly so. And I think what I've started doing now, which I think could be quite cruel, I don't know how other GMs would feel about this, is that I do say, whatever you say next happens. And if they've already said like, oh well, I'm going down the alleyway, oh maybe I should go back. I was like, oh no, you're already there. I feel like I'm trying to encourage them to make the choice, and it doesn't matter if it's the wrong choice or it fails. They've made a choice to move the story on, so you don't need to know all the rules or big swings or anything like that. If you make a choice, of course I'm going to support you in doing it. I think that's my main thing. I feel with newbies who are unsure of a system and not sure what to do, they have that paralysis, not being able to decide. And I want them just to be like, just make a mistake. Honestly, it'll be fine. I'm not going to be like pointing at you like Nelson from Simpsons, like, ha ha, you got it wrong.
I think that that's a great suggestion, as a lot of the games that I may run or play in, particularly in stuff like Call of Cthulhu, some players can have a tendency to get really hung up in hypotheticals and I have a theory. Maybe it's this.
Yes.
Oh, what if we do this? What if we go here? And the game can stall out for 20 minutes or longer at a time.
Yeah.
And so I really like the suggestion to just say, okay, whatever the next thing you say, that is what your character does. Maybe this leads to them stalling out for a little bit, but I think it's more likely people will be quiet for 2 minutes rather than just talk in a hamster wheel for 20.
Yeah.
And also, yes, you're absolutely right that it does come down to a lot of trust with the GM. Because if I am going to hit someone with consequences, it's never going to be punitive or something mean. Like, yes, you may have failed a skill roll, so maybe there are some new complications. It might make it more difficult, or there might be some repercussions that come down the line later. But honestly, it's just me spicing things up instead of you being able to walk through it as you were just making success after success. I think that this is also a really great strategy to help people be more present in the moment for role playing at the table in games.
100%.
There was a game of Bluebeard's Bride that I played recently that really stuck in my mind because some of the players were really getting hung up on the moves, and we were trying to role play through the rooms and things. It's like, okay, I am going to do this. All right, so I can do you accept? Do you feel bad? Do you feel okay? That means that you're going to get one wound taken off, and it kind of killed the vibe at times.
Yeah.
Right.
Some players would kind of halt and say, oh, I don't figure out these moves. And we would try and encourage them. It's okay. Just be present, be in the moment, role play. We'll adjudicate if you need to roll or do something. Otherwise, we're just going to go with it.
Yeah. No, I love that.
When teaching different tabletop RPGs, right, different systems, you have to kind of reconfigure your mind to think a certain way. Right, for Bluebeard's Bride, right, there's that move, oh, I dirty myself with violence, right?
Yeah.
Instead of saying, I dirty myself with violence, I want to use this move, just describe what your character is doing, and then the keeper or the GM is going to apply what move is closest.
Yeah.
It's kind of suspending the rules for a little bit and just saying, we're all going to be in this shared narrative role-playing space. And the GM presumably knows the rules at least halfway well, and then can lace the rules back onto it and say, okay, you want to do this? This is how we're going to make that happen. But the game can continue on without this stop start. Oh, what? How do I do this? What?
Yeah.
I don't think it'd work with every system, but I could definitely see going into a lot of RPGs and saying, I'm not going to explain the rules to you. Like, here, have these dice, X dice in front of you, and we're going to go through it, and you're going to tell me what you're doing, and then I'll just tell you what to do.
Yeah, what you want to accomplish.
Yeah.
I'm definitely having issues, and I'm currently working through going to like the gumshoe system from
Mm-hmm.
Call of Cthulhu, and because I'm currently writing something for gumshoe, and that's something that you have to like reconfigure your mind for.
Yeah. So I think my kind of question from that is like, once you have that conversation, do you see people improving? Do they then run in almost immediately to another stumbling block? Do you have to keep reminding them? What's that look like?
It's very interesting. I think because it comes a little bit from me. What I just going back to what we sort of talked about just now. When I make characters or when I try and run games now, I try not to plan too much or over prepare because otherwise, yeah,
Mhm.
people go around in circles. Then something happens. Oh no, all that time you've used wasted when I could have, I don't know, been sat here just like playing with the cat or something like that. I think I'm trying to make gaming sessions more efficient and then worthwhile rather than having all the stuff around it and get them getting too bloated. I feel like what it is that what I hope people do is that they go away and do their own homework and look things up.
Mm,
Like I will suggest here is a primer for say Plays in the Dark. Here are some actual plays which are quite useful. You don't need to watch it all, but here's like a good
yeah.
hour of it. Here is some music. I'm happy to have questions, etc., and be have office hours in quotation marks. But ultimately, I know what it is, and I know people are going to be like, "Oh God, really?" And it's just practice and having to be satisfied and sit with the feeling that you're going to be rubbish, and that is okay. Because I know there's that sort of expectation of like, oh, but we're doing stuff for streams. But all of my content, I always put that first of like, I am teaching you something, I am learning something, and it's okay to not be perfect when you're learning it. I get rules wrong all the time. Like when I do stuff like Blades in the Dark, and I'm like, okay, well, normally the rule is this, but because we've only got a little bit of time here and short terms, I'm going to change a ruling. And I want to empower not only players but GMs to be like, I'm going to do this. This is my gut instinct. How do people feel about it? Okay,
Mhm.
great. And if we need to change it later, that's good too. Like just being comfortable with the fact that I can change my mind and not be held up to this, to John Harper's Blades in the Dark,
Yeah. Yeah.
like the Bible of it all.
And I think that that's a good habit in general, not only for streams, although that's very helpful, at least as a GM. Like whenever we recently ran Chariot of the Gods for Alien, there were a few times that I forgot what different rules or mechanics were. So as a GM, I would just say, this is what I am thinking. This is what feels right in the moment. So we're going to go with that.
Mhm.
And then we can look this up later. I think that this is also very, very helpful for just regular home games because a lot of
Mhm.
folks may get snagged on rules and stop, go and look a lot of things up to then try and continue. And I find that it kills the momentum.
Yep.
It feels like a
Yeah.
holdover from playing D&D 5e,
Yes.
but maybe that's just me.
Mhm.
And I love how both of you do that, and you empower yourselves to basically toss aside the rules because at the end of the day, rules are just the guidelines on how to
Yeah,
get
100%.
this system going. But however, I do want to go into rules a little more because rules are also there for like the player to have as a means of protection. Like,
Yes.
hey, this says I can do this, and the GM should allow the player to do that
Mhm.
instead of being maybe tyrannical.
I don't know about you, Alex, but I'm always tyrannical in all of my games, and they enjoy it. No, no, I hear you. I hear you totally.
We've played some His Majesty the Worm, and that's exactly that same sort of thing of, I don't know what the rule is. I know there's a rule. Can't find it for the life of me. How do you bring that up the next session? Do you like do a recap at the beginning where you say like this is the real rule? Do you just kind of go with it, or do you do what I do, which is say we'll look that up before next time, and then you just don't?
I always try and look up because it's that sort of thing where I know it is important to the player in the moment. So I wonder if it's going
Mhm.
to come up for me again. And what I will tend to do, I tend to do if it's a stream game or something like that, I'll take 30 seconds, but oh, talk amongst yourselves whilst I have a look, and then I go, okay, I've searched the PDF
Yeah.
quickly, couldn't find something. I feel this exactly as Lex was saying, and then I will then afterwards I'll go right in my sort of downtime. I'll go, what did I get wrong? And I'll go back and look, and I'll go, oh, okay, it was this ruling. So I'll make a note of it to at least tell the players before the stream, saying, hey, so this is the rule, and I'll mention it on stream as well, because again, it's that accountability and transparency.
Yeah, they have the right to know.
Exactly. But then, often what happens 9 times out of 10, I'll go back and look at the stream and I go, actually, I handled that really well. Like it came across like that sort of thing. But then, like, in the moment, you think, oh my God, I am dragging this. It's like eons since someone last spoke, but actually it takes like 5 seconds. So I think in your own head, you do think about like, oh God, is it just dead air because I'm trying to look at this rule? Am I killing the vibe? And I think you feel it, but actually to people watching, it actually is moments because I've just got that point now going, no, this is boring. I'll find it out later. So yeah, I now will go and look it up afterwards. If I feel it's an important enough rule, and then let the players know, hey, I got this wrong. I will sort this out, and I will say so on stream and show that I'm accountable to my actions.
Yeah, I haven't even considered that. Yes, you do have a lot of these games on stream, so that's just another aspect of tabletop RPGs that you have to juggle when you're running this.
Mm-hmm.
You're a one-person show, so
Do my best, yeah. I try to. A one-woman band.
If I don't know a rule, my rule of thumb is like if you can't find it in under a minute, just let it go.
100%.
And I try to at that point like rule in the favor of the player a little bit. Like, hey,
Absolutely.
I really don't know the role. Like let's have a conversation. What do you think would be the role here, and we'll come to some kind of agreement.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think especially on streams, then it feels like even if it is just a minute, that minute feels like an hour.
It does.
gotta get the show on the road.
So I am feeling a rising pressure and tension, like, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck. And if I don't get it by the time I'm reaching a boiling point on there, then yeah, absolutely. Holly, I agree. Rule in favor of the players, or at least like what feels cinematic and right in that moment. And
Okay.
also, I'll be completely honest, I'm not terribly concerned with missing or sanding some corners down on some rules in different systems. I think as long as we're making an effort to play the overall system, there's always going to be parts of that is just part of making the game your own, doing what makes the most sense for you and your crew. Because, like, I know, Nathan, whenever you first started playing Thorkborg, you were just like, you know what, we're going to drop the money, not going to worry about it, it's tedious, it's whatever.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then if you find later that it actually does matter, it's totally fine to retcon and say,
Yeah.
hey, this is the actual rule, so we're going to adjust and continue on. There's no RPG police that's going to come knock on your door.
You have the actually
Nah,
people.
Me.
And me.
No.
And me
Except
behind
for
you,
angry
yeah.
commenters on the internet.
Yeah, you haven't been on YouTube, huh?
Yeah.
I think kind of from that, you have a lot of improv background, Fiona. We're gonna talk about that more later, but do you have any advice on handling that silence? I not even for just streaming, but I think a lot of home games, people worry about that sort of. If I pause for a minute, is it dead? Like, should we all just pack up and go home?
Yeah, it's to make the laser sounds and it.
You put down a sick beat whilst people
That's
are
it.
thinking.
Oh,
Yeah.
now that's clever.
The Jeopardy theme.
Yes, yeah, countdown, absolutely.
Make it as stressful as possible.
Yeah. My answer's different depending if you're a player or a GM, and also it depends, as always, on the game being run. I think as players, obviously, I think you're allowed to sit in that silence, and I understand again, it's very different from being in person where you can see non-verbal cues to being online where you can't really tell how someone is doing necessarily. So I think it's okay, and this comes from improv as well, of just saying in a scene, I don't know where I'm at. I don't know how I feel. Just saying that you be the vulnerable person going, I'm not sure what's going on. No doubt someone around the table is going, oh, thank God somebody said it. I don't know what's going on. But just being honest and then going like, this is how I see it. Oh, make sure I've got this right. And then you go through what you think you've discovered. And then people can then jump in and, quote unquote, correct you. Because the GM might not realize that that they've miscommunicated or that you're missing an important piece. Because again, we all zone out. We all, think about, oh God, I'm a bit hungry. Can we go for a break soon? All that sort of thing. Then going into the game itself, like, I'm not sure what to do.
Yeah.
And then just being like, it sounds like either this or this. Okay. But then not to worry too much about the consequence of like choosing one over the other. Because improv's always about like in a scene, I think the quote is like, you're going to have 1,000 funerals for your ideas. And that means like you come in with an idea and then something happens. You're like, well, I have to drop that idea. You grieve for that idea. And then you go, oh, but I've got this other idea. Oh, okay, grieve for that idea. And that's how we make stories. Is that how we get from, there's like, you've got these ideas, you don't hold on to them too tightly because otherwise that's just your idea. You're not contributing to a story. For a GM, and this is specifically for horror, silences are brilliant. Oh, I can sit in silence for ages. Because obviously I'll say something and then I'll think about it, and everyone's like, "Oh, she's going to say something incredibly scary," and it mounts up the tension quite a bit. And I'm just there going like, "I don't know what I should say next, so I'm not going to say anything." And then I'm going like, "Actually, could you make me a roll?" And they go, "Oh no! Oh, what is she thinking?" I'm just there going like, so yeah, as a horror GM specifically, it's okay to sit in those silences to amp up the performance and the tension. Obviously, it gets cut down in editing, but then the players are invested because they're hanging on your every word as a result. So those are my two sort of different takes on silences.
Excellent. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Just static noise going through the. Do we break for a snack? No, I think in particular what hit me out of that was the reframing. Holly and I were in an Alien game where we just had that conversation with the GM before a game where we went, "What are we doing here?" Like,
Yeah.
we're having a blast. This is a great time. I am confused about what they're asking me to do.
Yeah.
Can you just recap it, please?
Yeah, exactly.
And we were less confused afterwards. Still a little confused, but less.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So you've talked a little bit about challenges. Um, when you're sitting down to teach a new game for the first time, what do you start with?
So this is a very interesting question because I do think a lot of role-playing games get it wrong in that it should always be, I think the first thing, page 1 or 2 after the intro of what the setting is, it should be what the main mechanic is that you will be rolling for 90% of the time and not character creation. I understand why they put character creation first because you want to have these ideas of what kind of characters you see fit into the world. But I think you put that in the setting primer, and character creation and how, pre-gens all that should be later on. It's the main mechanic because you could be sat there, and I've seen this with plenty of mostly D&D actual plays. They just assume you know what the role is, and okay, majority of people will do, but like I think it's always important to be like, hey, just so that you know, the dice we're going to be using is a D20. You roll that, add a modifier, higher numbers are successful. It takes like literally 20 seconds. And I understand there's maybe a bit more like, oh, you got to roll 5d6 for your fireball or anything like that. But yeah, keeping those in check. That's why at the beginning of every episode of What Am I Rolling is that I always do like, hey, here's the main mechanic. There are other mechanics which I'll go into, but also I ain't going to go into them all. These are the main ones that you can understand where the story choices have been made. Because that to me is the most important thing. If I'm listening to a game, oh, that sounds really good. Is it just a conversation that they're having, which is really cool? I really like that. But is that a role playing game or is that just improv? So I that's the thing is that I feel like if you want to get people into a game, you say what the main mechanic is up the front. That's the key thing. Even if it's like 2 sentences or a paragraph, get it done, and then you can go into the what kind of characters you can play, etc. Because I think that's the thing for me for the system. If you tell someone like, "Hey, we're going to play," I keep going back to Blades in the Dark, but you can play, scoundrels in a Victorian-esque like place like London, but it's surrounded by lightning barriers which are powered by demon blood. I bet you've already got a character in mind of what kind of character you're going to play in that. I don't need to tell you like what the character is for that, but that's what Blades of the Dark does. For the like first 100 pages, it's like your character and your crew, and then you get to what the main mechanic is.
Yeah, that's something I entirely agree with. I really like in RPG books whenever you may have your initial introduction, what's the setting, general vibe, and then I absolutely love it whenever they have a character sheet with arrows that are relating to here is the character sheet you're going to be using, here is how the different things work, how you're going to roll dice and resolve these conflicts. Now, these are what the core stats are, and this is how you make the character. It feels like a very efficient progression
100%.
because I have dropped a lot of RPGs because it just keeps getting into, oh, what's the setting? Oh yeah, what's role playing and what's collab? And it's like, I get it. I'm not here for that.
We've been on this rodeo before, yeah.
So you're saying I shouldn't put my 5-page fiction story in universe?
Oh, only 5? That's
You
fine.
can put that away.
I say 5 pages. That feels generous.
Yeah. I'm looking at you, vampire.
Oh god, that is one of those books where you're like, let's see, how do I create a character? Well, not easily, and then not a bit of bloody matters. Don't get me wrong, I love it. I love all the ideas, but I do remember again we did a test game of Vampire for one of my projects. And I gave them the session 0, did the lines and veils, all that sort of thing. And I went away, came back to recording. I literally went in and everyone was like, how do we create characters? We couldn't work it out. And I was like, all right, let's calm down. What kind of characters do you want to play? It was absolute carnage. So yeah, no. Oh, terrible book.
So when you teach the core mechanic, I guess this might be a preference thing. Do you like teaching games that have kind of a one mechanic? Blades kind of has like their position, their outcome sort of role for that, but
Mhm.
they have a lot of extra stuff. Like once you get
Mm.
into downtime, we just ran into this with His Majesty, where like camping has a flow chart, going to town has a flow chart. It all has a flow chart. Like, how do you deal with that? Do you just wait for later, or do you try and get that up front?
I try to do it as it comes up in play. So like you'll hear me say it often when I do an episode of where and there's lots of different mechanics which are important, and I know that come up. I'll be like, as we get into it, I'll break the immersion of the story to be like, hey, here's the thing, and again, try and keeping those explanations under 2 minutes where possible, because
Okay.
again, it's that sort of thing, and I try again as an accessibility thing to be like, here's the timestamp of when the rule is, but here's when we go back to the action. So people go, oh, great, I don't need the rules. I can skip ahead, etc. Because again, not everyone needs it, but some people are like, I think she said something about fate points and story points, So I try and keep that as a way to be like, oh, and obviously the longer one shot goes on, the less of those explanations come up because obviously usually they come up sort of in the beginning. But I try and sparse them out. I think the longest sort of intro I had was about 10 minutes of like describing a certain ruling of something, and afterwards I was like, definitely needs to be shorter because of again that attention
Yeah.
span, but also that I'm sure there's ways I can break it up as well.
So I guess for streaming, do you usually do like a non-recorded session 0 with your players where you go through the basic rules, or do you try and capture all of that?
Again, it kind of depends on what we're doing. So if it says Patreon content, we'll do
Mhm.
a session 0, but we won't record, say, the safety stuff and anything
Yeah,
that
yeah.
people don't want to record. But like character creation and talking about ideas for the story, depending again on the system, we'll try and record and put that for Patreon content. But I'm very open to when I go onto other shows and stuff. I'm very happy for people to record all of the session 0 of mine
Mhm.
and to put it out there because a lot of the times we see this in quite a lot of TTRPGs now is that they have a section on safety tools and obviously how important they are. And I want to emphasize they are absolutely important, but
Mhm.
then we don't necessarily see them in play on stream stuff like that. Understandably, because a lot of people are like, it's very rare that we use them only when if it's immediate. And sometimes when I have seen them being used, they often are edited out at the end just because
Hmm.
it edited the flow of the game, etc. And also is a way to protect the players as well, which I totally understand. But I feel like if you are open, again, this is your mileage may vary to sharing like what your lines and veils are on a podcast that can go into session 0, then people go, oh, that's a really easy but also
Yeah.
efficient way. We're not having an hour of me going, oh, well, when I was 5, I can't have this, this, and this. I jest slightly, but I've definitely been in some improv classes when we've done the check-in, which lasts longer than the actual session itself, because again,
Wow.
people have baggage, and I
Yeah.
understand that. But I just want to, yeah, I always try and be as open as I can. And if I do need anything edited out, I can ask for it. But I always, when I go to shows, like, please record my lines and veils and my safety tool talk, because then people can hear about it and go, oh, it's dead easy. Of course, I can put this into my own game and just lead by example.
Yeah, we'll kind of go to safety tools a little later because I'm definitely curious from a streaming side
Hmm.
how you handle that, because again it goes back to in person, and especially with a group you may have been with for a long time, it's very different.
For sure.
So along the lines of that, the safety tools and whatnot,
Mhm.
one of the other things you do a lot in your TLDR is you talk about accessibility, like alt text on cover images. I've noticed that's a pretty common thing that
My soapbox,
doesn't
yeah.
show up. Let's talk a little bit about your background towards that. And do you have like recurring suggestions that you can just now rattle down a list of like always do this, this, this?
Yeah, I mean, I will say this: I am no expert on accessibility and this sort of thing. It's stuff that I picked up from doing that content development work at the
Mhm.
university. Certainly, when we went, all of our courses went online. Suddenly, there was a call for having subtitles for videos and alt text for images, and making sure that they were readable and screen readable. And it was just basics like that. And, stuff like, is this image good for people who may have red-green color blindness as the main type of color blindness? And I just find it interesting that we go to a lot of TTRPGs now, which obviously have a big focus on like, we are going to put them out through PDFs and give them really accessible stuff. But then on the front cover, it's usually an incredibly beautiful, gorgeous image, but then the text on it isn't readable. So if someone was putting it onto their screen reader, you can't read what it is. That you might not get till like 2-3 pages in, and it goes table of contents. You're like, well, what game is this? Even having stuff like, and I know I bang on about it, but like putting your name on your work. Sometimes you have a beautiful cover, and then there's no publisher, there's no artist or author's name on it. And I know why people don't do it, because it doesn't look visually appeasing. But like, if you've got a beautiful cover, that image is going to be circulated on Kickstarters. It's going to be on, like, say, Rascal News, all these places. And of course, people are going to cut out the watermark or anything like that. But I'm just there going like, why don't you put your name to your work? Because then people can go, oh, that game, it had this really cool cover. Oh, any little bit of like identifiable detail means that we can, like, it's more chance that your game will be discovered and people go, oh yeah, and then buy it. And so that's what I sort of go to now, is that I always think about like, why do I want to buy this game? What is it that draws me to it? And then the alt text stuff really came from, I have to shout out Possum Creek Games. So Zaber's Bed and Breakfast, Sleepaway, all that sort of thing, because that was the first game, as I sort of had a quick look into it. I think it was Wander Home, their sort of very cozy adventure game.
Yep.
Absolutely cracking game. And every single image in that book had alt text, but to the point of where it really described what the characters were doing, like motivations. Because clearly it was like the art briefs given to the illustrators. And I just thought, amazing. Why don't you put the art briefs as alt text? You've already got the text. And, I say this as someone like, accessibility shouldn't be an afterthought, and maybe adding alt text is tricky. I don't necessarily know, but I feel like if you've already got the text, you're not going to be sat there going, oh, I've got to have 50 images and I need to write what they are and stuff like that. But like some games that I've looked at, they'll have like what the game mechanics in images. They'll have like a really cool drawing of it, but then it's not written in text. So you're like, okay, this image is not screen readable. There's no alt text. If I was partially sighted or didn't have any vision, I wouldn't be able to find out easily what the game mechanic is, and that is an obstacle for me playing the game. I'm not going to play the game. I'm not going to learn anything from it. So yeah, although it is like Fiona bingo when it comes to Too Long Didn't Read. She's always going to talk about alt text as soon as it comes up, because that's the thing I always check for, that front cover, to see if there's any like cool alt text on it. And nah, 9 times out of 10 there isn't.
I was going to take a second to call out Morkborg, and then I remembered that they actually did release like the plain text version of their book, right? So, because you're like, oh, you can't even read it. This, and I'm like, Morkborg. It's just Morkborg. But then I'm like, I don't know. They actually did a good job with that.
Well, that's what's great about that, is that bare bones edition is free as well.
Yeah. That is nice.
And that's incredible as a result. And I think, if you're able to if you're in a position that you can give an accessible text version of your game away for free, then you're instantly going to have someone like, oh, great, I can play this. Well, of course, I want the really cool art edition, and now I've got a way to read it. So yeah, I'm big kudos to Morkborg. I think like it's nice that they did that. They didn't do it straight away, but I've very much appreciated that they did do that.
Although now that we are talking Morkborg, I think the first chunk of that is just setting, so that goes completely against what I was saying before. But that's cool setting, and I like it. So I guess it's okay.
Even then, I would say that it's different than what we've been talking about in terms of multiple pages being setting, because we've talked about it on the pod before, but like Morkborg has such a great vibe that it's just little snippets and excerpts with very evocative sentences, and I wouldn't have used that adverb there, but it just sets your mind really going. That like, I did not mind reading through those pages of setting, because like it's just giving ideas, and then the rest is for the GM to roll with it, with that vibe.
100%.
It's not the type of setting that makes your eyes glaze over.
Yes. It's not the 3 columns Vampire the Masquerade, which goes over several pages and makes no difference.
The Bluebeard's Bride book is like that a little bit, too.
Like that, yeah.
Or instead of giving details about this creature, I'm going to tell you about a game that I played in once 20 years ago, and this is what it did.
I know what you're talking about, Les. Hush. Hush.
No, that's every improv book ever goes. Let me tell you about this set that I saw 20 years ago. So, well, what about the improv exercise that you were hoping to teach me? No, okay, we'll hear you be nostalgic for a little while. Ugh, yeah.
Man,
yeah,
if you
yeah,
were there, though. Oh,
I
wow.
bet yeah,
Oh.
they had to be there. Cool. I wasn't though.
So one thing that I really enjoy having in these rule books is an example of play, though. That's really good. Like
Mm-hmm.
the player rolls this number and it explains the rules. I think a lot of books should have that.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Yeah.
I think what I find interesting when I'm going through them on the stream is I tend not to read them out because again I'm not voicing all the parts for it. But if I do struggle to understand a rule and then there's one straight away afterwards, I'm like, they knew that I need this accessibility thing. And often obviously they describe it in different ways. Sometimes it is just like a written like report of like these three players went and did this, or it's like a script. And sometimes they're in boxes, sometimes they're not. Sometimes the individual people they've got like colors to them as well, as if they were like a play in a sense. And so I always find it interesting when you think of a play example, actually how much should you give in terms of writing, and should it be that script like reading out, like what is easier? I don't know the answer to this because I often won't read them. I think I've got a good sense of what it is.
Right.
There's not a uniform way of doing a play example, which is great.
Yeah.
I'm really a big fan of that.
I think one great example that comes to mind for me is how the Alien RPG book does it. Because whenever I see the wall of text style, this is an example of play, my eyes tend to glaze over because it is a wall of text.
100%.
But the way that the Alien book does it is, as it is describing the different rules, you have the nitty-gritty mechanics, but it is giving a couple of lines at a time of a play session.
Yeah.
And it goes through, they rolled this. This is how this rule comes in. So there's a little bit of narrative, a little bit of crunch, little narrative, little crunch. And you can read all of the example of play together and it makes a cohesive story. So
100%.
I found that it worked with my squirrel-like attention span very well.
You know, that's kind of crazy. This is kind of like an off conversation, but the Disco Elysium video game writers made the dialogue in the Twitter format so people could digest it easily.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, so it's kind of like that.
That's funny.
That's great. I love that.
I think like for me personally anyway, like the higher concept the rules are, the more I appreciate that. Like if I'm dealing with a highly narrative system that's not really about rolling dice and it's more about players playing off of each other, like I'm thinking very specifically of Under the Autumn Strangely, which is like diceless and it's just like players kind of playing off of each other a lot. And that's when I want an explanation of what's going on here, like or an example of players interacting in that way. Because like you tell me to roll d6, okay, I don't need like the snippet from that, but yeah, the high concept stuff I do.
So we've talked a bit about some of the books. Are there any standout books lately that you've run across that have really like surprised you or impressed you with their I guess production?
I mean, I can go instantly to one from today, our day of recording, which was Triangle Agency. And I say this, I only looked at the sample, which you can get for free on the Haunted Table website, because I'd heard a lot about Triangle Agency as a game. Lots of folk that are in various sort of networks I'm in talking about it. But again, that sort of thing where I'm like, it's 300 pages. I don't have time. Am I going to run this game? And I sat down, and what I loved about it is not only is it well written, but it is formatted and laid out as if it is a employee's manual. I definitely has inspirations from, like, say, Paranoia, a bit of Severance in there, that idea of, like, you are part of an agency, that you have to go sort out these anomalies, and there's clearly something bad with the agency, but don't worry, everyone is A-okay. So you have that sort of very dark humor, feels very like Blackadder, Monty Python, very Douglas Adams in places as well. So instantly, all those touch tones, I'm like, oh, great, I love that sort of thing. But it was written in such a way which was very easy to read. Again, having those sort of maybe short sentences, again, that sort of online reading thing we were sort of talking about just then. But also the illustrations were beautiful, no alt text, I will say. But the icons that they're using, like in terms of like, here's a flow diagram, here is this, and it just felt like very Stanley Parable as well. And I just the sample, I will say, no dice mechanics. It was all vibes. But instantly I was like, wow, it's done such a good job of like going, here is a setting, here is an idea, here is an example of a session, what we expect in a session. And yeah, and ideally it should be like 10 to 30 missions, but it could be a one shot. But instantly I was like, well, I want to know more. And it was one of the
Yeah.
best quick starts I've seen in a long time, compared to one that I do think is less good. And I don't mind calling that. The Fallen London quick start is not great. It's one of those things that, again, has good potential. It has that nostalgia feel. It has that a little bit of vibes. And then, in terms of like over explaining the mechanics to I don't know which audience it's going for. But again, the layout was really interesting, and it's like it was just so wild, the difference in like how I felt about it. But yeah, I think Triangle Entity is the big one that I think of just recently, because again, I looked at it today and I was like, well, instantly I'm going to have to see how I can play this game, because it excited me not only as a GM, but also I was like, maybe I should play in this game, which is very rare. I'm always happy to run games to see how they go and inflict them on other people, but now I was like, no, I want to play in this game. So very rare to do that.
Yeah, the art for that is another, like, it'll just grab you and it's like, hey, I gotta see more. This
Yeah,
looks rad as
exactly.
hell.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a Magpie's game like thing, because Root had that same problem of like,
Mm-hmm.
I think I get it after a page and a half of telling me what hitting something with a sword looks like. I gotcha.
Yeah.
I
Oh no, another 6
understand.
pages to go. All right. Well,
Oh,
maybe there'll be
yeah.
a change. Yeah. Yeah. No, I do think it's a Magpie game thing. And I thought it would be different because it's a different system to their Powered by the Apocalypse, but no. But you know what? If somebody out there will find it enjoyable to play, I'm sure.
And if they did a Cliff Notes version, like, that'd
Yeah,
be even better,
I'd
because
pay for
I've
that.
played Root. It's awesome. It's a
Yeah.
really fun game. But yeah, it really is just going back to the book and trying to find a rule or read it quickly. Is It's not happening.
Impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that that's something I have been finding very useful lately in terms of learning a system and being able to teach players roughly how to navigate a new system is while I'm reading a rule book, I will try to sketch out a cheat sheet. And by the
100%.
time I've read the book, I have a cheat sheet to then provide to players. If they want to read the book, that's perfectly fine. I consider that more optional. I would rather walk them through different rules as they happen because it's a refresher for me and I get
Yes.
to work with everyone at the table too.
Mhm.
But having that cheat sheet as a consistent reference is very helpful and it helps ensure I understand the rules at least a little bit better than I think I do.
Yeah. I think it's always cool to streamline books. And then when someone goes, oh, I don't understand this, and you go, oh, I missed that out because I thought that was obvious.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's very interesting. Again, we're not necessarily game designers necessarily, but to how do we get this information across and streamline it for players who don't, again, attention spans, don't have time. They have other obligations than to read 300 pages of books. So getting it down to even 20 pages. If they go, oh, is this the main mechanic? You go, oh, thank God. Phew, someone's read there. Someone's read it.
Are there any RPG systems that you feel like are particularly beginner friendly?
Ooh, this is a great question. Again, I feel like again, it is absolutely. I do think any game can be beginner friendly if the players are keen. Like if it's like
Hmm.
something about the setting and story, and then you build it up from there. Like for example, I will say this: like I know by looking at me, you can tell that I'm a massive nerd, but maybe not a big Warhammer fan. But who knows?
Wow.
But I got asked to be in some streams for like Wrath and Glory, and I don't know anything about the lore. I was a bit worried about, stuff because again, it's like big space marines and for the emperor and heresy. But then when we got into it, obviously they told me what the main mechanic was, but they said like it's a bit like Blackadder goes forth. Nobody wants to be in this war, and so they're trying to do anything to get out of this war. And I don't know if it's just the group, but I instantly was like, oh, are you doing something heretical? Me? No. Are you doing something heretical? And so that I found that it sort of grouping in there. So I think if you've got like a touchstone or something like that for the players, that's the way into it, and then you can up the difficulty a little bit. But I always shout out that one of my favorite games I always love running is a game called Solemn Veil because of the vibes and the story. And the mechanic is so simple in the sense that you have these three stats of body, mind, and soul. And you have 15 points to divvy between them. And then when I ask you to do a roll, say like, oh, we're going to do a body challenge. Someone's chasing you down a street. It's going to be a challenge rating 5. And basically, you roll a d6 and you have to beat it. And you can spend points from either of these pools to increase your roll. But you have to do that before you roll. And then after you roll, if you still haven't succeeded, there's another little pool called the Weird Pool, which can do some bad things
Yeah.
later. And what's really interesting is to see players debate whether or not it's worth like spending the points now, maybe early on in the session, where the
Mhm.
challenge ratings are like 5, 4, or 5, and then later on they discover like, oh, challenge ratings go up to like 7, 8, 9, which can't be achieved on a D6.
Yep.
And it's great because I had a player who was like, and the setting as well, I should say, it's again not for everyone, but it's set in the 1970s in Cornwall in the UK. So you have that very small mind mentality. It's folklore, horror, that sort of thing. So
Yep.
ooh, we don't like any fun
I'm
from
gonna
the
have to look
outside.
this up.
Yeah, it's one of my, again, I would highly recommend the setting for it. It's just so interesting. Again, it's one of those books which are way too much and maybe not best laid out, but there's something about it where you've got all these different horror aspects that you can pull in. But to see someone spend a lot of points from their mind pool because they're trying to defeat like some misogynist comment in a bar, and you're going, I don't know if this is a challenge that you need to succeed, but you know what? Do it. And then they do, and we feel really excited for it. But then they're like, oh wait, I spent all those points, and now how am I going to do for the rest of this episode or rest of the session? It's just fascinating. And so yeah, it's just a dead straightforward, D6, add points and stuff. And there's ways to recover points and stuff like that. But I just thought that's such a simple system that you can use it for anything, right? But
Mhm.
then the setting itself for Solemn Vale, like I said, you've got factions, you've got things, on the moors, you've got things in the mines, you've also got like a cult happening, you've got witches. It's like anything you want, you can like really lean into it. And it was just one of those things where I was like, God, I never really thought of it like that. And yeah, just and having it set in a different time period. So not only do you not have the technological advances of like phones or computers and stuff, but like the 1970s in the UK, in a time where there's political upheaval, people are out of work. Obviously, the swinging 60s has just come to an end, and people are like keen to get going to the 80s. Lots of stuff to pull from, which is not necessarily a place that people would necessarily go to. So yeah.
Have you introduced that to dumb Americans like us? Like, do you find that translates well to, I guess, other places, or is it a bit of like it'll hit harder if you're there?
What Solemn Vale specifically are you talking about? Or
I think so, yeah.
yeah, no, that's okay. I think it's interesting because like for me, I didn't grow up in anywhere in Cornwall or anything like that, but that idea was well, put it this way, like I know obviously in America that obviously you have very small towns, much smaller than sometimes you get here in the UK, and you have that idea of like a town could literally be just under 100 people, and I think you could easily transfer those vibes over again Midtown America and all that sort of thing. I think there's definitely cultural things that you can do, but I don't know whether you would have to change stuff about the folklore, for example, to make it more hit harder to
Oh.
home. But I don't think it's necessarily too hard of a leap. Like you'd have like the high school, and there's like the dinner lady there. Oh, she's up to something really suspicious, and then she's got a big family, and they're everywhere, and they all look like the same person, and this is really weird. But I guess it depends. Again, it's that sort of culture thing, like any TV show if it's good in the UK, and then you have to translate it a little bit for a US audience when you do the adaptation. But if you've watched any films like Inheritance, for example, or I always think of any film by oh, I can't remember his name, but like Men is just
Mm.
men in
Oh.
general.
Oh
That
my.
sort of yeah. It's definitely one of those things. What I quite like about it was in the advice from the book. I won't talk about Farmville too much longer because it's one of my favorite things. I could talk about it forever. It says don't give them a car. So maybe that's the thing that might not work
Ah.
in America because everyone
Yeah.
has cars. Because
Mm.
obviously then people will just leave, and you're like, you can't leave. That's the whole point of Solemn Vale.
Yeah.
I've found that like introducing, especially I play a lot with people who've never done RPGs, period.
Mm.
And I've always found that there's two really good concepts that get people into RPGs. And one is like realistic, like they can physically like think of themselves in this. Like it's the 1920s and you're a person investigating something. Like maybe, yeah, the 20s is 100 years ago at this point, but you can still kind of imagine that time period. It's the 1970s in England. You can kind of still imagine yourself
Yeah.
in that. It's the 1980s and you're 12 and weird things are going on in your town.
100%.
Or it's absolutely ridiculous. Like you're
Yes.
bears and you're going to try to break into a high security vault and steal the honey. Like
100%.
I think like the spectrum of like those two things are really good to just bring new people in. Either something that they can easily put themselves in or something so ridiculous they don't need to.
Yeah. 100%.
Honestly, I would argue that those are more similar than you're giving credit for. I think
Mm.
that each involves a context that is straightforward for a person to envision around them. In the same way that, like, I have never been to Egypt, but if I start mentioning, yes, you're explorers, you're going to be going into this pyramid with a tomb that's just been discovered, everyone is immediately there. We have seen the mummy, we know what this is, and that's something that I can be in that person's shoes, which I think helps for role playing a lot versus like being a bear to break in and do honey. I think we've all watched cartoons. Like we've
Sure,
all
yeah, that's
seen
fair.
a lot of these very wacky things, but I think that it's the more separated from that you get. Like I would argue, at least for me, I have a gist of Blades in the Dark, but it's a really unique setting that like I have a harder time envisioning and would need to learn a little bit more about
Of
to
course,
feel.
yeah.
Kind of the same thing with Traveler. I get the gist of sci-fi, but I think with sci-fi it gets very differentiated very quickly. But yeah, I absolutely agree with your point overall, Holly.
Yeah, the struggle, and I'd love any advice you can give, Fiona, is getting like new people to like role play, to improv, to embrace that, and instead of saying like I think my character would go into the shop and maybe talk to, it's like, no, let's just talk it through, or even just like the Frozen, like, I don't know what you want me to say, and just tell me what
Yeah.
you want to do, just tell me what you want to do, you know. So if you have any
Yeah.
advice.
I think, again, the go-to thing, and it comes to improv as well, is that ultimately, why are we seeing this session? Why are we playing this game or this moment? Like, in improv, for example, you ask for a suggestion of like, we need an event, and people go, a wedding or an anniversary. And it's like, okay, why are we seeing this particular anniversary or this particular wedding? And the same thing with when you get like suggestions of genre of fantasy, it's like fantasy, sci-fi. Okay, why this? And ultimately, regardless of the suggestion, it's about the people. Either they are extraordinary people in ordinary circumstances or ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. So, like you were saying, like if they're scared about like I don't know how to role play, it's like just play yourself, because that's a very easy reach for you to do. It's just reacting as yourself. A lot of my characters are just me, but with one aspect really turned up. And often I go, when I get surprised by something, I go, oh wait, no, I had a bit of a higher voice. It's like, and I don't make jokes of that. But once you're playing, they're playing characters that maybe aren't like themselves. They're non-humanoids, so they may be Aarakocras or I'm just trying to think, tiefling, something that's just a little bit further from what they are. As long as they're not punching down and making like culturally insensitive things, as long as they're comfortable with like maybe that free line thing of like, my name is this, I came from this place, I used to be a blacksmith, I like cheese. Like, obviously that's a bit more of a like a, they're going to mention cheese every single time now they enter a shop, but at least gives them something to jump off. I've got to that point now where I try and be more proactive in things myself as a player and see what other people do. But I wonder if when you're brand new, you're like, oh well, I don't know if anything I do is right. And as long as you keep the options very narrow for them to do stuff, and then when they make a decision, it's that sort of like Pavlov's dog. Like, oh well done, yes, oh and this happened, and you go, oh I did that, yeah, I did that, and it's just again that reassuring that no matter what happens, they're going to have a great time because it's making them a good scene partner. They are the star of this show, even though the GMs are also a player. But it's like they did a really cool thing, and that's why. And I know we'll talk about safety tools and stuff like that in a second. But like Stars and Wishes come into such a big play at the end, where you go around and say like, well, so and so did this really cool interaction with so and so, and that set us up for this and this, and people might not remember that they did that because they're like, oh, well, I got this thing wrong. It's like, no, well, you did this really cool thing. And they go, oh, I guess I did do a really cool thing. So, yeah, just reinforcing that
Yeah.
whatever the choice is, doesn't matter. They did a cool thing. And then they'll get more confidence slowly but surely. I feel it. It's very hard because if you're not a natural theatre kid like us lot, it's very difficult to just like make a mistake and not feel like you're going to be judged for it.
I love that point. The just be yourself. That is such a strong and important point. I recently had a conversation with a friend who wasn't really into tabletop RPGs because they've self-proclaimed that, oh, I'm not a creative person. But when I explain it in such a way that it's like, oh, well, along the lines of what Fiona said, just be yourself, but like be yourself imagining yourself as a blacksmith. Like, what is your idea of a blacksmith? Your
Yeah.
idea of a blacksmith is different than my idea of a blacksmith, but because you're just using your own memories and experience with what you know.
Yeah.
And highlighting all of that, that's a good way. And my friend was like, yeah, I can definitely imagine myself as a blacksmith now.
100%.
I think bringing this more towards a horror lens, though, I would want to weigh in with a slightly
Please.
disagreeing sentiment. Is I would not recommend players play themselves because that sounds like a great way for them to avoid engaging with the horror narrative.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
And
true.
what I
Well,
have
play yourself if you
Brave.
didn't care about
No,
danger.
Well,
Yeah.
what I typically recommend is saying like play someone like yourself in a movie. Play play
Sure.
yourself
Oh, right,
cast in
right.
a movie. That there
that,
is that there's no attachment to survivability. And if it's in a movie, sometimes you want someone to open the door with the wailing and chains going on behind it because you want to see what Hellraiser shit's going on in there.
Mhm.
If it's me, I don't want myself to get Hellraisered, so I'm not going to do it. And it leads to an unsatisfying session.
But they
Yeah.
have such sights to show you, Lex.
That's the 10 candles approach. You're gonna die anyway. Just
Yeah,
have
don't worry
fun.
about it. I will tell us a short story. Because I did, so because we've been talking about Vampire the Masquerade, so I did run Vampire the Masquerade, and of course, as always, they broke in somewhere, and somebody was like, "Hey, stop!" And I obviously my big weakness as a GM is coming up with people's names. So as the last sort of thing, I used my mother's name as the name for this
Mm.
character, and of course, within 30 seconds, she was dead. And so I told my players that, and they went, "No, why would you put your mother in a game of Vampire the Masquerade?" And I was like, I wanted to see what you did because then I really revealed that connection. And they were like, "Damn!" And I think they've got them really thinking about like, could we just use other people's names? Obviously, maybe not at the
Mhm.
table, but that sort of vibe on it. So just what you were saying, Lex, about that. I was like, yeah, obviously, don't play yourself because you're going to have all this methodology. Oh, I shouldn't touch this thing. Oh, this seems really bad. But that leaning into like, yeah, this is what my character would want and stuff like that.
Or what I would want my character to do. Like, I want to see this happen in this mental movie, so let's lean into it and make I think we called it a suboptimal decision later, because I
Yes.
think, especially coming from games like D&D, some players may have some bad habits instilled to like always think in the most tactically optimal choices
Yes.
at a given time and metagaming and stuff. And so this actually leads me to a few questions. Holly asked for your recommendations on how to introduce brand new players to role-playing games. But do you have any advice on introducing players who may have some bad habits or, dare I say, baggage from systems like D&D 5e? Because this is something that I know a lot of folks I've chatted with in the horror tabletop role-playing game sphere have had to work with. We have had a joke before that if you're going to provide maps to players, do not put a grid on it, or they're going to immediately assume
yes.
combat and try to fight a Shoggoth with their bare fists.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's a very interesting question.
I can break it down into some specific situations if that would be
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, go for it. Absolutely. Yeah.
To start off, and sort of contrasting something like 5e with traditional horror systems, a lot of these horror systems have people playing regular people. You are a person, you are frail, you cannot punch a xenomorph to death. You are going to lose that fight. And whenever I tried to introduce some D&D friends into Call of Cthulhu, there were a lot of instances of them just criticizing that the PCs are weak and shitty, I believe was the quote. At least that's what stuck in my head.
Just
And I'm
real
like,
life.
yes, this is not heroic fantasy. This is a different kind of game. Well, why would I want to play this? And it's getting this resistance right out of the gate.
Yeah.
How
I
would you deal
definitely
with
feel
that?
I think this is interesting. If it's up to me in terms of the choice of the game that they played rather than we decided him, I would just go for a game that was so out of their comfort zone in the sense of like a challenge for them to try it. So instantly a game I think of for this would be something like Brindlewood Bay, where the whole point is that you play elderly grandmothers and women who are solving mysteries and crime with an eldritch sort of overtop thing. And it's so different to anything else because you can't fight in it. It's powered by the apocalypse, but also you then together collaborative work out who the murderer is. There's no canon to it at all. So you have to talk to each other. And I think the reason I would suggest that, not necessarily because of the system or something, but it's the fact that you're playing elderly women. How does that look like to people who normally play D&D? These young 20-somethings like, I'm a hero, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, well, this is a different kind of protagonist. They're not frail women. they've got lives. We do flashbacks to them like being bad mothers, being bad daughters, all that sort of thing. And yes, maybe I think it's maybe a bit tricky, perhaps, if they're not used to like role playing and going with the flow and knowing what the stuff is. But that challenge of like, should we just play old ladies tonight? It's like I think that sort of thing going, sure, because it's such a wild outlet. So maybe things like that. There's other games where you're like we talked about Gumshoe, so like you're playing teenagers trying to solve weird little mysteries and stuff. And I just I think that's the thing. I would look for a game like Alice is Missing, for example, that silent role playing game where you're just doing it through text. You're playing these teenagers who have like connections and stuff, and then for 90 minutes you just sit in silence texting each other, and you've got a soundtrack in the background, and then you finish it, you go, what was that experience? It was so different and emotional. So I think that's something maybe I would just take away what, any sort of system that they're used to, maybe not even have dice rolling at all and go for those more storytelling games just to like say, look, here's the opposite end of the spectrum. And yes, we have to talk to each other, but you like talking to each other. Normally you just have stats to go with it. No stats, no maths, just talking,
So it's like a cold plunge. You're in the sauna of D&D, and then
Yes.
you plunge into the icy braves of narrative
Alice
games.
is Missing.
The
Absolutely.
icy waters of Brindlewood Bay.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, we love Alice is Missing. That's we've played that a couple times, and it's
Great.
very
Yeah.
affecting.
Nathan's very mean to me in our games. I don't understand why.
I don't know why that's happened, but
I'm always mean in Alice is Missing, and I'm not that kind of person. I have to be like, I'm so sorry for what you're about to experience as my inner teenage
Just
Fiona
get it
comes
out.
out. Ugh, I just hate you. Yeah, exactly. That's me every game.
But I am going to latch on to something that you mentioned before, that putting them on the far opposite end of the spectrum may help them get more into the role playing, as I think this is another very common problem, or I shouldn't say problem. This is another very common issue that some GMs with 5e players have had to work with, that this resistance to engaging in a first person perspective and actually role playing as their character, speaking as their character, and not, yes, Andrew the accountant will go here and he is going to check the books to see if there is a cabin that may be hidden and if there is an address. And it feels like there's that degree of separation, which I think that feeds a lot into some bad habits with metagaming. And in terms of always making the most tactically optimal decisions, because it's easy to think of this RPG character like a video game character that you can move around and navigate perfectly and never stay out of sight lines and never trigger the traps because, I can tell it's a 5-foot square.
Yeah.
So
100%.
what would you say would be helpful to break out of that metagaming third person perspective and try to really get into that shoes of a first person role playing perspective?
I just want to acknowledge the Baldur's Gate 3 effect that's happened as a result of this. Because good lord, it is awful. From my stint of playing Curse of Strahd, they're going like, well, one person's really good at perception. We'll just keep going in every room and they'll perceive. I'm like, God, how boring. Yes.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I think people latch onto it because they're like, well, my character's good at this, and so therefore I can't be good at anything else. So this is my role, this is my job. But then going back to Blades in the Dark, you can do anything in that game. Like, you don't have to be the person that's really good at talking to ghosts. You can talk to ghosts, you're just not good at it. So it's that sort of thing where you can still roll for it. And I think, like, it's so tricky because, again, people get into that mindset. One thing I do try and do now, and I've done it with Call of Cthulhu as well, because, again, certainly the old sheet was there's a lot to it. And again, you see the players looking like this as they're looking down, obviously not taking any of the information in. And I'd start by like describing the scene, but then I'd be like, you're on your way to whatever X is before we get to this place. I want you to describe something that you notice that stands out to you. It's just something small, something about the environment. And often the players were like, well, I see there's a gun here or this, that, here or whatever. And that's fine. They've
Okay,
contributed
Alex.
in a way. Yeah. But then going to that idea of like, okay, cool. But then I can call that back, that they see something because they've mentioned it and they go, oh, I've made that impact. And we've seen that with video games recently where you can record your voice as like the monster, then it appears later on. And people get very excited that their thing that they put in the world appears and is important, is significant. And going back to Bluebeard's Bride, one of the reasons I really like that game is that as the groundskeeper in that, you go through that sort of setup about what did the brides fear, what do they do, and you use that to construct the rooms and really get into that sort of meaty thing. And now, obviously, it could be very subtle, it could be very obvious, but I love that connection. So maybe being upfront with that sort of like, hey, you can roll perception all you like. This room's still not going to have anything in it because there's a lot of empty rooms in D&D. But what do you think? What do you see is in the room? And then, they're like, oh, well, this. And I go, oh, it's much worse than that. That's my favourite line in any Brindlewood Bay or The Between, anything Jason called over is like, you say it's much worse than that. And then you come up with something, again, because they've given you something. So I think offering it to the players to be like, what do you find? What do you see? And it's also a good test for you to be like, what have they actually taken in from what you've said? Because sometimes they don't. But I think that's the thing. I'd offer them, what do they see? Don't roll for it. What do you see? And then I can add something to that. Because then I have an idea what they're looking for, rather than me just go, oh, you found another gem. Great, put that in your bag. I guess you'll sell that later. Like resource management,
But it's 25 gold.
Why does it matter? It's a one shot.
yeah, no one cares. Big painting, take that back with you.
I do want to get back to that point where you said Baldur's Gate 3 effect. I've had a player once that was just like very new to RPGs, and the rest of the party's talking to them, and they were like planning to mug them in the end, but this new player is like, okay, I just stand right behind them. So like that is such a Baldur's Gate 3 thing to do. It's like, and then like he was surprised when I had the NPC say like, hey, you're getting a little close to me, and look, he looks back.
Blades to Dark, big tip I would recommend if you watch the Glass Cannon stuff, if they start to plan at any point, the facilitator goes, hey, it sounds like you're planning over there, guards! And they're like, oh no, shoot! So like I love that. Like that idea of us going, well, obviously I can hear you. What are you doing? Like you're not keeping a secret about it.
Right.
Unless you say the word stage whisper and then you all go in, lean in a little bit. But yeah, I think it's very hard because again, as we've rightly said, feels like a video game because that's what a lot of touchstones will be for this. But I think getting them to it's a bit of the story and getting them to contribute to the story early on and then encourage them to keep going. That's one way to do it. But I did not have the perfect method for it either. It's I empathize solidly, certainly with stuff like Blades in the Dark.
Further on the point of video games, like when I'm explaining tabletop RPGs to new players, right? I lead with, it's kind of like a video game, but instead of the computer and the code being the game engine, the person running the game master, they're the game engine, and they're not constricted with ones and zeros. They can think of anything that you can think of. So that kind of gets them in the right mindset, preps them.
I can never get in the mindset of a player. That's impossible.
But then they get shocked when you say, okay, well, here's the consequence. Wait, the consequence of my action? I was like, yeah, it's here. Oh, look, you're all going to jail because you blew up this place in Blades in the Dark. And well, what can we do with it? Well, you can reduce it so only one of you goes. It's like, but why? It's like, you
Unlucky.
Blew up. You it's happened. You've said.
This is actually something I'd love to get your input on as well as constructive ways to help players deal with consequences, live with consequences, something that I think most GMs have had to work with sometimes. Again, another holdover from 5e and Baldur's Gate is, everyone does a spot hidden roll, an alertness roll. Oh, everyone fails. Well, okay, nothing really seems unusual in this room. Oh, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do it again. Okay, I'm going to roll again. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it again. And it's like, yes, of course you're gaming the system, and it's a fucking pain in the ass, man. Like it's there needs to come a point whenever sometimes I'll just be like, listen, this is the consequence. Or sometimes as a GM, if someone has, failed a luck roll or some other type of skill check, I won't stop them from progressing with that failure, but it will be a little more difficult. I said before, like I'll make it a little spicier to try and get the same information. And they'll instead needle in to try and remove the consequence so that they can continue on unabated. It's something of a bad player habit, and I'm not really sure the best way to deal with. I'm curious if you have any input on that.
It's it's that sort of thing where again it goes, well, I'm very good at spot hidden. We'll always hand over to the person to do the spot hidden, but then as a result, it means that if you've got a good idea as a player, you're like, oh, but my character wouldn't think of that. And I'm like, obviously they'll think about that's you. You are your character. I think for this, again, there is that point of like being the mean GM, going like, hey, you've done it now, but you can't do it again. But I know obviously there's some mechanics of like pushing yourself. Obviously you've got the panic stuff in Alien, that sort of thing. So I'm always willing to be like, okay, you can do it again, but I'm gonna have to give you like a devil's bargain. It's gonna cost you time. It's going to cost you stress. It's going to cost you something to do this again. And because then they're spending their resource and weighing up whether it's worth it or not. Same thing with the Solemn Veil thing of like spending points. Is it worth to succeed at this small check at the beginning, spending all your points on it, when because of the nature of the game, it's going to get a lot tougher later on, if they need that sort of encouragement there. But I'd always be like, are you sure you want to do this now? If you fail, I'm happy to, because some games give you XP for failing. It's like, great, you can get better at it later. But yeah, it's sometimes there's that fear of like, well, I don't know what else to do, so I'm just going to keep doing it. I think my go-to would be like, you spend the full 10 minutes doing this and you don't get to do anything else as a result. That's a waste of your time. Surely there'll be something else you'd want to do. Laying out the other options like, go talk to the townsfolk, go shopping, go this, rather than like, I must work on this lock constantly.
It honestly sounds like sitting the player in the corner for a bit. You want to do this? That's fine. Okay, you're going to sit in the corner for 10 minutes while you search the library again. Everyone else, you having fun?
Yeah, everyone good?
Sometimes as a player, I do that, but I try and be like, no, my character I know they're being unreasonable and stubborn.
Mm-hmm.
They're angry. They're sulking. They're going to stick at that lockpick until it breaks or they do. Like there's no in between here.
But you're happy with that consequence then of not doing it, and you've said that, and you've already said that to the GM, who goes, cool, I don't have to worry about you because you understand what the consequence
just in a corner
is.
staring at a lock.
Yeah, it's not just trying to avoid or negate consequences.
Yeah, exactly.
I think while you were talking about that, I think Public Access does a good example of that. Alex has run that a couple times for us.
Such a good game.
Where you get to see the horrible thing happen, and then you have the player. You're like, do you want to undo that? Because you're dead otherwise. That's kind of a fun way to be like, oh, I can still fail, and it's still fun.
You
and
get
then
to
I
see
can
the
turn
gory
it back.
death.
Yeah,
and
then
the Prince
eventually.
of Persia effect, where you go, no, that's not how it happened. First time. Yes, no, I love that. Yeah, anything by the Gauntlet, Jason Cordova games with that, putting on the mask, putting on the crowns, the turning the key, love it. I think that because again, it allows you, the facilitator, to then really describe in real detail, and then you go, could put on a mask if you'd like, and they go, yeah, obviously I want to do that. That sounds dreadful.
But it's nice too, because when the end does come for that character, they've had those chances to be like, you know what, dying is kind of fun. Like it's not the worst thing. And so when they finally run out of keys or masks, it's still fun.
That's it. Yeah.
They've lived a good life.
Not really. Usually in those games, no. So let's talk safety tools, because you play with a lot of groups. You have a diverse number of people you play with. What do you use at your table?
Yeah, so I used to go to sort of like X card and Lines and Veils, and I'll just say it just in case people are hearing it for the first time. So X card just means that if there's something that comes up in play where you, the player, feel uncomfortable, you either say it out loud or you subtly do it. However you do it, you're like, oh, X card. And you can say what the element is. I always ask what the element is because sometimes there's a lot going on, especially if you're like herding cats, But you never need to justify what that element is. We just remove it, whether we have a break, or that person just needs to step away, or we just fast forward the scene or remove it completely. That's the X card, and I think it just does the job. Not everyone likes it, obviously, because it kind of stops the play a little bit. So the other go-to, which I do, and I use that, during games. The ones I use before games is mostly my sort of Lines and Veils sheet, which I've modified a little bit. Again, Lines and Veils, line is just something that doesn't come into the story at all, and a veil is something that can be a part of the world or whatever, but it has like a little veil over it. So a good example is spiders. If there's a line for spiders, we don't talk about them, they don't appear in the world, but a veil might be, there's lots of cobwebs that you might get your hair catched in, you can see scuttling things in the distance, but you're not going to have a full-on grounded Honey, I Shrunk the Kids moment where a huge wolf spider comes out and attacks you. Ugh. And what I've done with that particular form is that I actually have created like a Google spreadsheet, which I've gathered from different places that I've run games before and used their sort of consent forms and all that sort of thing together, so that I have it's like a group anonymized one. So rather than sending out forms or people saying, "Oh, just DM me" or stuff like that, it's a way to collect this data quickly. And I formatted it so that if you click, because it's like in columns, so you'll have like a line, a column, a veil column, and ask first. So if you want, oh, can I just check in? Is this okay to do this? So you just break the immersion at the table, and then an interested column. And what happens is that you can click as you go through. Again, it's all anonymized. But if someone say clicks a veil, it blacks out the ask first and interested line, so no one can tick that. And similarly, if you click a line, it blacks out the other columns.
Nice.
And so it just shows that, again, the highest sort of safety thing, if it's a veil for everyone. But if a line, if someone clicks as a line, then it becomes a line for everyone. And what I like about it is that it just means that there's no pressure to fill it in and have your name to it. But also it's something that can be organic in play. And there's a place where you can add more detail. So, for example, you'd be like, oh, I don't want anything like about dental trauma. Not for me, but it can be part of the story. That sort of, so and you split it down into different sections, so like real world horror, social issues, etc. Sometimes we've had stuff about personal, like PvP, NPCs betraying NPCs, that sort of vibe. And yeah, and then the interested column is something that I've added and something that I do because I sometimes it's just nice to know, like, what are you interested about this game? And people are like, oh, morally grey choices, and I'm like, that's every game I play. Brilliant.
That sheet sounds miraculous, quite frankly. This is something that I've struggled with for some time. Would you be okay sharing that? We could try and provide like a link that folks could copy in the show notes of this episode.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'll say it out loud as well, because I've gathered this form. I've created this sort of own version of it, but the original sort of forms I got were a mixture of sort of from the streaming service Girls Run This World, Euphoria, and Stellar Luna as well. Have these sort of forms, and I've just combined them and used them for my own purpose. I'd say not only do they have these sort of topics separated by sections, but we also have at the top relationships and sexual content as well. So you might be, as a player character, you might be like, well, I don't mind being romanced by other player characters, etc., but not NPCs. And obviously anything about sort of sexual content, I tend not to do on stream anyway. It's not my sort of bag anyway, but just to say it like, hey, we're never going to describe it in graphic detail. So just having those expectations at the top. But absolutely, yeah, I will share you a link because I think, yeah, it's useful to have.
Thank you. Yeah. I've taken almost an opposite approach to it because I tried listing a lot of the lines and veils, but found that I was too concerned with spoiling certain things in a given scenario. And what I have opted to do instead is following the CATS format in session zero's concept, aim, tone, and subject. And as we get into subject, I will describe some of the potential content or trigger warnings that occur in a scenario or a campaign by default. Like, this is what's in the text or what I'm planning on delivering. And then I list my personal lines and veils and then give open sections for player lines and veils and tell everyone it's an editable document so players can input whatever lines and veils
100%.
that they want, knowing that this is probably going to come up in the campaign. And it's totally anonymous. And then I will go and read it later. And then I will just have this as a shared group document.
100%.
Because the spreadsheet it got too complex for me too quickly. So thank you for doing all of that work.
Oh, no. Yeah, but CATS is a great thing.
That's a really good point, Lex. I don't think GMs give themselves enough grace in that, like, they are also kind of engaging with the narrative too. And they should also let players know what their personal lines and veils are.
Yeah.
I find it's an initial step of trust because some players may feel self-conscious or awkward, especially if we're giving lines and veils in person. I've seen some folks kind of clam up. And so just being able to open the door and say, hey, these are my things that I'm not going to bring up. I would mention these as players too. Hopefully the players will feel more comfortable doing that themselves.
It's setting by example, and something that I started doing as well is, sometimes I'm lucky enough to have a producer that's doing the stream for me. But also, I also invite them to the session zero where I would discuss the lines and veils briefly at the top about what's been happening, and then do what you were doing. So, hey, will these things come up? Possibly. Here's some examples, etc. But I invite the producer to also contribute to that, because even though they're not an active player, they are still a part of the stream.
Interesting.
And if there's a content where they're like, "Ooh, I need to step away," that's obviously a safety thing because we might not know that they're not there to put us to break or something like that. So I always welcome if we have additional people that are helping the stream going live or helping with the recording, that they take part in the session zero, just even the safety bit. They don't have to be there for the character creation. But then at the end of it, when we do the debrief with the stars and wishes, I invite them to do that as well. Even though, again, they might be like, well, I did a good job. That's my star. I wish you guys played really well together. But I want to include them as a part of the group as well. I don't want to feel that I'm just using them for somebody else to look at the OBS whilst I'm, being a pretend wizard around the table.
So you recently mentioned this in your Mad as Hell review,
Mm.
and I understand that there's a difference between pre-recorded and streaming. So you talked about a little bit about safety tools for the audience. You mind sharing that here?
Oh yes, so what's something I tend to do? I always try and write out my sort of bit of a script at the beginning when I try to do a stream. Most because then I don't see the stream and I just concentrate on my little writing thing and then get over those nerves. But what I tend to do, I try almost jokingly, but like sort of say like, hey, this stream, it's dark. We're gonna cover these topics. Here's some general themes. But if you, the players, if this is not your sort of bag, that's okay. I give you permission to step away and stuff. And I know some people do that, like, oh, make sure you hydrate and all that sort of thing. But sometimes you might be watching your friends doing a game, or you might be, oh, this is really cool. And something just hits you out of the blue, and you don't know what will trigger you. Like, I don't mind sharing this example. Like, I went to go see Smile, the horror film, in the cinema. And I love the concept of Smile. It was great. But there's a moment in it where they're trying to find the cat, which has mysteriously disappeared. And then it goes to a birthday scene. And in my head, I knew what was going to happen. But then that scene focused on this particular image, this sort of thing, for a long time. And I was like, whoa. And it brought me straight out of it. And I had to leave the cinema. And I'm someone that loves horror and stuff. And it really affected me. So now I'm very aware that, like, hey, if it's not your bag, totally okay. You can always come back to it. And I want to make sure that people give themselves permission. And there's certainly a lot of femme presenting folk don't do that. They just go grin and bear it. And I'm just going to normalize it that this might not be for me. I might have to leave as well. So yeah.
Fiona, I'm so sorry, but you just opened a hell of a can of worms that I have been so mad about this for so long. Absolutely. I always am stunned because I usually read and play TTRPGs and read horror novels.
Yeah.
And I think that the horror community on both of these fronts is always very good and respectful about content and trigger warnings, lines and veils, and especially in horror novels, I adore whenever authors will say there are some slight spoilers, but this book contains XYZ. You can check a list in the back because we know that this is done with care, that we are engaging with this horror because it's fun, but we want each other to take care of themselves. And I am always aghast whenever I go to watch horror movies or honestly any movies, and they have pet deaths, sexual assault, all kinds of stuff. And it's just like, where's the fucking warning for this? I forget that this isn't commonplace, that it would be so lovely for there to be actual content warnings on a movie poster for things like that, because I know exactly what you're talking about in Smile. And that's the reason I don't go to cinemas very much, because I'll fast forward through that and I'll watch it at home.
100%.
Okay, my rant's over. Sorry.
No, it's
appreciate
a
it.
good rant, and I'm a big fan of the website Does the Dog Die?
I was going to say,
absolutely.
great website. Yeah.
Because it does handle a lot of those things. And yeah, I stopped Smile too, of just like, I'm out. I see where this is going.
But it was wild though, because like the rest of because I obviously carried on, watched it, and I was like, well, overall, I enjoyed the concept. I just didn't need that bit, and it really ruined my experience of it.
Exactly. It didn't add anything.
Yeah,
And I don't wish to be like, well, I don't get triggered or anything like that. It can happen to everyone. You don't know what someone's going through, that they might have just turned up and they're just ready to play, and then something comes up and go, oh, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just being aware, even if you've played with someone for 30 years and you're like, I know so and so really well, you're like, maybe you don't, Oh.
And in addition to Does the Dog Die, a friend of mine also shared triggerwarningdatabase.com, which is extremely helpful for reading, that you can search by different triggers or titles and authors to ensure that a book that you're about to pick up doesn't have things like that. I know we recently read The Only Good Indians in my book club, and I had no idea there was so much harm to animals in there.
Yeah.
I thought it was just kind of hunting, but no, it was worse.
But I will say, on the flip side to this is that, like, again, I always talk about how important safety tools are, and like And obviously, it's very important that we do them in the session zeros. And I try not to go too long into it, about half an hour at tops, and then having a break to come back. But I know, and I'm sure you folks feel this as well, that when we talk about safety tools, there's the energy drain out of the room. People are like, oh, we get it. We're not going to hurt each other. And even though we talk about the importance of it, the more importance you have on it, people kind of shy away from it. And there's this discourse now about, oh well, I don't need safety tools, because they're worried again spoiling or this or draining that energy. So what I've done, again, I have to credit my teacher, Katie Shute, in her sort of improviser's way, her book, and she talks about, like, she learnt that one thing that she started doing with her check-ins from I think it was a Second City improviser, was to talk about boundaries. We have boundaries to keep us safe, and then boundaries of something that gives us delight. And again, I put it in my Lines of Veil document. It's like, what excites you about this game? You know, what are you interested? And it could be about the specific genre that you're doing, or it could be about, I love monologuing. I love those small moments. I want to do a cool move. Like I always say, my thing's like, hey, we show the system. One dice roll is enough. But also people showing up, people engaging with my story, people doing outside the box thinking, that sort of thing. Because then people go, oh, well, so and so really loves like a big character monologue. I can help them get to that point, and it doesn't have to always happen. It's organic, but then you know what people really like in role playing games. I think that's always, you end that bit before you go into character creation to be like, okay, I know what people really like about this game or what they're looking forward to in this game, and maybe if I see the opportunity, I can push towards that, and it just gives us something to go off from there.
I like that, bringing the positive side of it into it as
100%.
well.
Yeah.
If you have gotten heart at all, they've actually made that part of the core gameplay where the player will actively say, like, my character is trying to do this and this in the next session, and that's how they get XP.
Yeah.
So as the game master, exactly, like, it kind of gamifies it. But yeah, there's no reason you can't do that for other games of,
No.
like,
100%.
yeah, I'll go into Alex's game as I want to die horribly by something eating me. We could probably make that happen.
Yeah, we did like an Orbital Blues game, and one of the players said, I want to die. Like, I want to have a death in the game. And the GM was like, that's interesting. Let's do that as the first scene. Like, that's the first scene that we did. And then everything else was in flashback. So it absolutely changed how they were going to do the story as a result.
Really cool.
And
Really cool.
it was really cool because, again, we didn't know that as players, but then it happened and we're like, damn, that was so impactful. And we knew where it had come from, that session zero. So again, it's a listening exercise for the GM as well. But it just, yeah, you never know what your players are going to say. And you might go, that's so much cooler than what I was thinking. Rip that up. Let's kill everyone off in the first episode. Great. And then we'll flash back,
That's really, really cool. You mentioned something earlier, Fiona. It was like stars and something else, and I wasn't
Stars and
familiar with it.
Wishes.
Yeah, can we talk on that? Because I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we've talked about safety tools like sort of during the game itself. So I use the X card, but there's loads of different other ones. Play, repeat, not repeat, fast forward, pause, all that sort of thing. And then you've got like lines and veils, which is sort of like the admin before. And then something I try and do after every single session is something called Stars and Wishes, and it's a way for us just to debrief. Like, I'm sure you've all had it, like when you've done in-person games, it's like you end the session, you go, oh, that was great, and then you have 15 minutes of like tidying up, getting to your car, grabbing the snacks, and just chatting and decompressing. And whether you're driving home with someone, like carpooling, or you're on the bus, you get that chance to decompress. Nowadays, when we're online, people go like, bye. And then you just sat there going like, well, it's 2 a.m. and I have feelings. And it's very hard to decompress, perhaps, because, lots of stuff might have happened. You might have felt like you did really well in the session. You might have done really badly in the session. And so along with like various sort of bleed tools to sort of separate those feelings and like leave them in the game session, the Stars and Wishes is something I think is great, where a star is something that you think was really cool in the session. It could be something that you did, it could be something that someone else did. And then a wish is a very nice way of giving feedback to the GM of, similar I was saying, like, oh, I really would love to see these two characters talk about something, or I'd love to have a scene with this person, or I think we're going to have a chase scene next time. That's where it feels like it's going. So it's a way to give that sort of little bit of feedback for the GM to go, okay, that's what my players are interested in. And so yeah, similar to those like story beats that the character creation does for Heart, I really like it because not only do I get a pat on the back as a GM because I did a good job, because sometimes you end a session, you go, God, I think I did really rubbish. I forgot this one rule, and that's what you focus on the negative. People go, well, you did this, and this was great, and this was great. It shows what they enjoyed about the session, and it helps you lean into it. But it also, like, again, going back to that idea of the players not sure what they do, if they did a cool thing, tell them they did a cool thing. Because my God, it's so gratifying to know that your decision has changed someone. Like, oh, we had to be there. You should have seen Holly did this cool thing where they backflipped and they saved the town. What, and that's the thing. I just want it's just highlighting that no other place and time. Like, why this session? Why today? It's because Holly did a backflip and it saved the town. My start for that. So that's why I always encourage people to do it, even if it's just a quick 5 minutes at the end. If people have to dash, putting them in like a Discord chat or something like that, just be like, hey, I saw this, because I think they are so valuable. Like, I did a recording session recently where we didn't get to do it at the end, and I was aghast. So I immediately in the Discord I was like, oh, so and so did really well. Like, I was like typing it out because it's the way that I was decompressing, and people were like, oh yeah, well I guess so and so did really well. I was like, oh, thank you, some gratification. But yeah, no, I always recommend Stars and Wishes. I do it in improv. I do it wherever I can, because it just means that we've done it, and it sort of just ends that ritual of the game, and then allows you to go off into the night. And especially if you've got lots of feelings about what happened, like venting it in a nice, safe way where people can go, oh, I understand that. Oh, I didn't see that. Okay, well, next time let's have a scene where we can resolve that.
I like that a lot. I do the videos for a lot of our actual plays, and I've been trying to do more of exactly that. Of a week or two later, you might hear from me going, I loved this part. This was hilarious when stole the laptop from the guy, and then the guy behind you stole the laptop from you. Like, that was a great scene. You knocked it out of the park, or whatever. I think the positive feedback is really nice.
Yeah, and you don't get it. Like, let's face it, corporate work right now is awful. You don't get it from board games. You're like, oh well, I guess somebody won. Like, because it is most
And it wasn't
TTRPGs
me.
are collaborative. It's not GM versus players anymore. So, and you get you get out what you've put into it. So that's why I was saying before, like, if you're putting in a lot of effort into it, and you're making other people look good, people will see that, and you get such a cool story out there. They go, God, I want to keep doing this. This dopamine hit is brilliant.
That's how
and
you
so, yeah,
keep your
just to
schedule
actually,
going.
yeah, you got to keep the schedule. That's the BBEG of everything is scheduling. But just to have that dopamine hit and be going, yeah, you did a good job. I love it.
Yeah, I will come back next week.
Yeah, I think, yes, I'll do this more, and I'll buy the books. And oh no, I've got the screen. I've got all this dice. I am the forever DM. That's what happened.
Are there any books that you would like to suggest that have good examples of these the safety tools ahead? Because I think it's pretty common these days. We'll see the X card, the like kind of enshrined within the rule book, usually with a link to the website it comes from. I know Jay Dragon, who works with the Possum Creeks, which we've talked about, is developing a new
the
palette grid. Yeah, I haven't read it.
Yeah, I don't know much about it. That sounds really cool, though. I really like the idea behind it of like being able to, like, hey, there are some topics that do trigger us, but we want to explore those topics sensitively. How can we manage it without having the lined veil of it? So yeah, I like that. I'm just trying to think, the book that actually comes to mind, and I will say it's not the first one to do this, etc. But I will recommend Die the RPG, because that is a book in itself of like, it's Gothic Jumanji, but about a cursed RPG, right? So there's various meta levels about you creating a character that then creates a character that goes into the game, and so you're constantly going between your paragon, the flawed human being. What I like about it is that I think it writes it out in a way, and the way you create characters is a questionnaires, and having that opening and closing ritual that you give out the dice that's associated to your class. So you open and close the circle as you do it. And I think little rituals like that, again, I just think that's really interesting, because then it makes you feel special that you're about to engage in something. Similar to like the Blade 68 playtest I've been doing recently. They have a thing called the opening title sequence, where it's like an intro to a vintage TV show, where you the GM will describe like a scene, and then you throw to one of the characters, what do we see them doing in the opening titles of this particular series? And it could be something like generic, or it could be something about a previous heist, whatever they want. Then it comes back to you describe something, you throw to somebody else, and it just gets them warmed up. as we described, this
Oh.
really cool beginning to an intro of a TV show. And I just think that's you need to have that in every game. I think that idea of like throwing to people, getting them in that creative move, getting excited, and they could it could be anything. I've had players go, yeah, you see my character falling out of a window, like back with the glass breaking, and they go, cool, we cut away from that. Don't know what that means. We'll find out.
We did that with Bedlam Hall to introduce actually a lot of the NPCs that are there, because you have like a whole family, and at least I, as the GM, found it super helpful to just be like, I'm not going to introduce you to this whole strategy of the Lord of the Manor.
Yeah.
You're gonna see him cleaning his shotgun in a chair and accidentally blowing away the butler behind him, and then he'll smile and point to the camera as it says Lord Blackwood.
Mm.
You get what it is then. Like, you don't necessarily need the full backdrop. And yeah, I love the idea of having a player then be like, okay, what's your little scene?
Yeah, 100%.
I believe Alex was pushing people into mirrors, something like that.
Never.
Let's talk my favorite topic, improv.
Yes, and yes.
Yes, and there. That's all we really need.
Yeah.
So reading your curriculum vitae, or however you say it, you're not only very busy, but you've actually done classes for teaching improv to role players. What kind of started that? Did you start improv and go role playing? Did you go role playing improv?
I started the podcast first. Originally, I started Where because I wanted to show people at my work that we didn't need video, we needed audio desperately, rather than these academics looking like into the video camera and then, oh, terrible. That's a story for another time. But I did that, and I was interviewing some game designers. I actually interviewed Zach from Soul Muppet, so the person behind Orbital Blues, Inevitable,
Okay.
Mad as Hell. And I asked them the question I always ask my go-to is like, oh, so what would what's one tip that would help you run your game better? Like, it was their first game of like Best Led Buried, and they were like, oh, take an improv class. And I just went, that sounds great.
Yeah,
I will. And then I just never looked back. Again, that sort of thing where I was like, I will hyperfixate on this myself for a long time. Because it's true. Like, again, it's that idea of not making mistakes, and I realized that you could be big and bold and it doesn't matter. And I got performing on stage and stuff like that. But then when it came to teaching, it was actually fascinating because a lot of improvisers have like done a little bit of like mostly D&D, but obviously haven't gone to the where I'd come from, this sort of background of like, oh, look at all these games. So like one thing I started talking to improvisers about, because they like doing different formats. Look, the Herald, it's there, it's a staple, but people are like, well, how could we change it to be really interesting? And so, for example, I took in the between, you have a scene, it's called the unseen. So part of it, and as part of the night phase, where you have like a story that's happening at the same time as your characters are doing stuff, but the stories are not related to what's happening. But you can have echoes in the night. So say, for example, the story of the unseen, this London scene, the story that's happening. Each player has a prompt about describing this hotel and how a bellboy is sort of looking in and sees this sort of thing, and what does that make this person feel? And then you go back to your characters doing something in the night. And if, for example, you were describing like a champagne flute that's full of bubbles, and then suddenly you're like, oh, there's the bubbles as someone is drowning in a pond. That gives you XP.
The match cut.
Yeah, exactly. And so I took this example of the unseen, because a lot of improvisers, they like telling stories, but they did it and go, well, you should see what happens next, and then they go and do that scene next. And I'm like, no, I want you to do two different stories, one scene after another, but like split them up. So try that with that format there. Letter writing, I love a good letter writing. Good Society has an epistolary phase which people just sit for ages writing their letters, and I will tell you exactly what I think, because you can't talk to me at the same time. And so I got improvisers to sit in a chair, and another improviser like looking away from them, and they would pretend to type on the typewriter like a letter of something. It could be anything, and obviously the improviser had to remember the important parts of that letter to then come back and then do their response with that actual sort of changing. So you never saw the person. You couldn't respond to them until after they've done a letter. And I had to say, you've got to keep it short, because people's people's brains are not strong after COVID, but it was really fascinating because they bloody loved it. Turns out people love letter writing. People love being able to tell stories that aren't connected to what's happening, and it just really sort of scratched that creative itch. So yeah, those are the sort of things that I was like looking for. Those unusual things about, and again, talking about silences, making sure that we can only do scenes that are silent. Alice is missing. I was like, we can only try text. We can only use the chat. We can't do anything else. What does that make for improvisers? And it's just giving those sort of like limitations or rules. Suddenly they go, oh, this is great. I love rules, you know.
Mix that in with the zip zap zop sort of back
Oh,
and forth.
zip zap zop. I was terrible. Questions only. I die. Questions only. The worst game.
Are there any good improv to role playing exercises? Is that kind of where you were going, Alex?
Yeah, like things that you can do by yourself, maybe
Mm.
like before a game to warm up, that will inspire creativity or inspire good improv further down the line. Because like it's a skill, you have to just keep doing it.
100%. I feel like if you are coming to a game and you're unsure about your character, like a good way to make up characters is to have like an adjective and a job role. So
Yeah.
the improv,
Cipher system does that.
yeah, exactly. The exercise I know it as, it's called clingy priest. So you have an image of this of a priest that's clingy. It's like do a quick monologue of that character. What would they be like? You know, but
Oh,
also
that's
just
cool.
but practicing the voice as well. If you're going to try again, it's always very terrifying when you're trying a new kind of voice, even if you're not good at it. Like I would say, I'm not very good at accents. I don't do them on stream because I don't wish to offend anyone by terrible Scottish accents. But like I know maybe like okay, they're going to speak a bit slower. They're going to have certain touch tones. They're going to have character catchphrases. So maybe I'll write down a couple of catchphrases. Maybe how they sit or something like that. If you're that sort of person, I like doing a little bit of dress up as well. I like having a certain coat on or something like that that makes me feel into that character. So it's not necessarily improv, but yeah, clingy priest is always a good one if you're like, I need, especially if you're doing a one shot. It's like it doesn't matter, like I'm thinking like a heartwarming postman. You're like, oh, hello, Jess. Ha, 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 ha. It's that yeah. It's just
Yeah.
it's just a way to just get out of your head. Because I think that's the main thing is that we worry about like, oh, but I need to get it right. Just get out of your head. Just do it. Crusty mustard scenes and all that.
So you have some exercises that you took from role playing into improv, and it sounds like they were hits, which makes sense. There's a lot of overlap between the two, and like people just like making stuff up. But are there any lessons that you learned in role playing that you took to the stage?
Yes, it sort of goes back to that extraordinary characters in ordinary places. When we get suggestions like, where would we see these two characters? And someone goes like, oh, an airport or an office. And then sometimes people go, a castle. People go, oh, a castle, amazing. I will be a knight. Haha. And you're like,
Yeah.
yes, you could have that. But what the knight's talking about, they're probably talking about how Arthur's like taken Lancelot again to get bloody mission going on. It's the petty tribute. It's that how do you ground those scenes? So that's why I always think is that it's when someone says, "Oh, we're on a ship." Say there's a ship thing. I go, okay. People are always going to think. I think 9 times out of 10 it's like, oh yeah, it's a sailing ship and there's a captain. But like captain, it looks like Klingons are on the starboard bow. That sort of right. It's again, it's interpreted, and I know I can do that because I can pull on those nerd things. When someone gives you a suggestion, try and write down 3 other suggestions where you can go. That's sort of like the tent poles, and it doesn't matter if they're right or wrong. It's like, oh, my brain went here, and that's a fun place to go. Because we do get stuck in these like, oh, because you give me the extraordinary thing of a castle, I can be amazing and big, and it's like you can be a big character, but what are they talking about? Because there's only so much you can talk about. Like, oh, we don't got to fight the dragon. Save the princess. Take money from the poor. No, that's bad, Gary. That's what the sheriff is doing in Nottingham. No, so I think it's tricky. It's definitely through practice for sure. And I also, I've done like just over 5 years of doing it, but I also has done some terrible scenes as extraordinary characters in extraordinary places. So
maybe that's a good lesson from role playing is it's okay to not latch onto a character right and just have a bad thing, because I've definitely had some where I go out of the thing and I'm like, I don't know what that character was thinking. Like at any point, I don't know why they were there, or what they
Yeah.
were doing. Oh well.
Yeah.
What
for
I'm
sure, for
hearing
sure.
is we all need to play more. Something is wrong here to flex
Yeah.
both that
Yes.
RPG and that improv muscle.
100%. Yes, yes, yes.
You'd mentioned the Herald, so
Yes.
could you give a quick like kind of
Oh, the structure of it, I can.
the structure of that, and then maybe some others that you'd like to see games adapt? Because I know you had discussed community radio a little while back,
Mm.
and I think that game is very structurally just an improv game with a kind of
Yes.
a cycle of like, okay, you have the players talk and do a little scene, then the GM commences on that for a little bit, then we're back to the players.
Yeah, there's a little bit of admin. Yeah. So yeah, the Herald in basic terms is that you'll get your suggestion, and then you do like an opening scene or an opener where you generate ideas around it. That could be like a word pattern game. It could be like a living room thing where you talk about it, and then eventually someone will go, "That's it. That's what we got." And then you have sort of 3 scenes, which will be separate, and you probably have different players in each scene. Normally 2-person scenes. And then after
Mhm.
those 3 scenes, you have something called a group game where people sort of come in and do something different that's not necessarily connected to any of those 3 scenes we've seen. Then we do another 3 scenes after that group game, and each scene will correspond with each of the scenes in progress. So if you have scene 1, we'll go with scene 4, scene 2 is scene 5, and scene 3 with scene 6.
Uh,
And then you have another group game, which is again will be slightly different to what other group games. And when I say group game, it could be stuff where you have a town hall and it's like, all right, quiet, I will take questions now about this topic, or it
ah.
could be more like something physical. It
So
can
that's
be,
like everybody basically at that
everyone
point.
that comes on, yeah. So it doesn't have to be, and you play different characters perhaps, or you explore things. And then often you have like an optional final 3 scenes, which again would connect with like, so yeah, scene 1, scene 4, and scene 7. Goes for, and you don't have to have them, but it's in case you haven't finished off the story, because it ideally should be like
Okay.
sort of 3 acts. And the way we go about with these scenes as well, the way they connect, they can either be time dash. So say if the first scene is a first date in a restaurant, we could have a time dash to the wedding day, time dash
Hmm.
to someone's graduating or a divorce happening. That's what the time dash is with the same characters.
That's
Sorry,
a
that's
hell
the
of a
way my
time
brain went
dash.
to. Or you could have something called analogous, whereby you could have, I don't know, say somebody a breakup of a relationship in the first scene, but then maybe it's a breakup of a beehive, like the queen is leaving in that second scene, and in the third scene, I don't know, deities breaking up. Again, it's
Mhm.
whatever the concept of the first scene is, you put it, but it's like, what if this, but animals or objects or somewhere else. And it's again
Yeah,
this,
yeah.
and people will recognize that pattern of like, oh, the third scene. Well, we know it's going to be a breakup of some kind. Oh, of course, it's going to be Zeus and Hercules. That totally makes sense. But that's the sort of the main structure for it, and it's used for a lot of improv formats because again, it gets you that idea of like this scene, then next, and next. One of my favorite formats that is sort of based on the Herald is something called a documentary, whereby the opening you have, so you get like a suggestion for a fictional town, say. So
Mhm.
say if I said Rottenstall, that's a fictional town. Each person in the part of the idea generation will maybe step up and say a fact as if you would see it on a Wikipedia page about Rottenstall. So you'd be like, Rottenstall is famous for making cheese. Rottenstall has a flag, and on the flag is a
Uh,
ram's head with an eye patch on. And from that, you start to make like maybe people about the town, some NPCs, whatever. And eventually, someone will come up and go, "Okay, Rottenstall, the ram that took the cheese," or something like that. Some sort of title that we'd have in a documentary. And then those first 3 scenes will be like almost like office style mockumentary, like interviews to camera with 2 people sort of talking out. And then you have the group game will be like somebody going around town going, oh, well, I'm here to do some vox pops. You, sir, can you tell us about the cheese festival that's happening? And get that sort of vibe going. And I just love it because it's, again, you think about all those, I can't remember the director's name now, but those sort of like improvised sort of films, Best in Show is the one I can think of where it's like all about
okay. Yep.
crufts. Yeah, and all of that is kind of improvised. I love that kind of vibe because then it's just like you have these very weird characters and they're all connected some way. It's because it's the town, it's the location. So I always talk about the documentary because I think that's a really fun way of
Oh,
coming up with a cool story. That means that everyone is connected with this idea of what they generated. So that's the one I always recommend to have a look out for.
oh, that would. We've played some like found footage ones. That would be really fun to use
Yeah.
for that.
Let's hear about some of your favorite RPG stories. things that make you think, yeah, this is what it's all about. This is why I do it.
What are your stars, Fiona?
My stars. Oh, nobody ever asks me. Yeah, no. Like I can always remember one really big example. So one of my favorite suggestions to give as a game recommendation, and maybe this should have been come up for the newbies, is a game called In Name Only. And all it is that you take your name, your first name, so obviously Fiona for me, which has 5 letters in it, and each letter corresponds to a power that your character has in this world. So for Fiona, I have fire magic, ice magic, oversized weapons, nature magic, and archery. Great. So that's my character. It has the same name and everything. And all I need to do is whenever I use any of those powers, I will roll a d20 and I take the number of powers I have away from 8, and it's a +3. So if I use archery, it's just a +3 to my roll. And that's kind of it.
Oh.
So the more letters you have in the name, the more jack of all trades you are. The
Ah.
less letters you have in your name, the more powerful you are and more specific you are. And I came up with this rule is that basically, and the players I had, they were all a group of wonderful ladies who had never played an RPG before, and they got very excited. But I think in the game it says like there's no names for like the NPCs. You know, it's like the butcher, the mayor, the newspaper girl. But then you could turn to the players and go, okay, what's their name? And they go, oh, well, Evelyn. And you go, okay, great. You look up what powers they have, and it gives them a bit of life as a result. And I just remember this one shot we did for Where, and you can hear it. And I just remember I had a really tough day. I got rejected from a job interview or something like that. And I was like, okay, it's all right. I've got it. We'll run the game. And it was kind of like one of those games where like, they had to go save someone because a demon had taken over, and they defeated a demon by saying its true name, or the usual fantasy stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they got to the person that was on the table, and I was like, they're not waking up. You might be too late. And a player who'd been quite quiet had done little bits and pieces, but was like hadn't done a big move. She went like, I know what to do. I've got something. I was like, yeah, go for it. And so she said, I go over, I get this person's shoulders, and I shake them, and I go, Fiona, you need to wake up. And I just burst into tears because it was one of those moments where suddenly because they saw me and they were like, of course we're going to call them Fiona. This person that's created us here. And I just remember the joy because no one else saw it coming. Everyone screamed, like, "Oh my god, it makes sense!" And I just, like I said, I burst into tears. I had to stop the recording because I was like, "I've had a really bad day, and you've done something so nice for me by putting me in my own game." That was such a beautiful moment. And they're like, "I know exactly what it is," and it's so simple. It could have been any name. It didn't have to be mine. But I was just suddenly like, "Oh shit, this is so cool." And I just think that was such a nice way of getting people to think about how can I make a cool story. Fuck it, just say someone else's name. That's great. So yeah, I always remember that when people talk about favorite stories. So yeah, thank you. I'd forgotten about that story.
You're welcome. Heartwarming.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's what I like, Alex. That's exactly what you said. That's what we do it for, right? Like,
Yeah,
that's why
this
we
makes it
donate.
worth it.
Yes, exactly. So
I'm kind of interested in hearing about what systems and games that you're into right now. Your current obsession.
I mean, imagine if I said Blades in the Dark to you right now. No, it's I've really
Let's say
enjoyed
Blades in the Dark.
I think it's it's this new system. It's only about 10 years old. I always recommend Blades in the Dark again from that sort of improv, proactive background is what I'm excited about. Like the Triangle Agency I've talked about recently, because again, no idea of the mechanics, but my word, the vibes are immaculate. And Southern Vale as well. Like again, that sort of like it really itches that horror vibe for me. But I will say that games that have arrived recently that I've bought on a whim. There's a game called Lovecraft-esque, which just had a second edition, which all cards and stuff like that. And I knew it was one of those things where, again, I was like, I need to get the physical version. I'm one of those people who always gets PDFs and stuff like that. But I was like, if it's card based, I want to see how it plays. Why is it cards instead of a PDF? The Zone is another one of those as well, where it's like very much like Annihilation that you're playing through.
Cool.
And I only recently, you mentioned it earlier, Holly, I've only recently played 10 Candles. Wow, that's such a good game.
Great game.
Oh,
yeah.
Why are we not talking about that every Halloween? So yeah, I it's so weird. Like it'll just be random games. I go, I've not played that for ages, and I'll read something. I go, great. Why am I not doing this all the time? So those are the top ones I can see like in my corner of like books. I'm like, I need to play that again. I need to play that soon.
Well, maybe. I mean, you've got a group here. I'm just saying.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about kind of going for the horror games and genres because you're playing Blades in the Dark, which is pretty horrific. Like there's demons, there's ghosts,
Yeah.
and the ghosts are like the least bad thing in
Yeah,
there.
weirdly, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. You do this as a streaming thing of how did you kind of figure out what the tone of the group was?
Yeah, and I think this goes for all the horror games as well, because I feel that horror games do get a bit of a rep. It was like kind of what you were saying, Lex, before about like good horror stories always have like content warnings or like you know what the vibes are. Usually there's like a foreword or something like that. And I think horror games, like video games, maybe is the one that sort of takes like priority people's minds here. People go, oh well, I don't want to be scared. Why would I want to play a story to be scared? And in my head, I'm like, because it's the best thing in the world, and we do it safely, and we're not, again with those safety tools, we can do it. And I feel my big sort of pitch is that any story you can create can be a horror story. It's a veil that we put over things, like the Solemn Veil game I sort of currently running just now. Again, it's about people being trapped in this tiny village, but they're playing teenagers as part of a women's football team, a soccer team, and of course they're like, well, we've got all our own like issues because we're teenage girls, but also something horrible has happened, and we need to find out what's going on. And it was just interesting to be like, this could be easily a sports drama story,
Yeah.
but it's not. It's a horror story, and the tone. I've come around to this because before I used to be really tight on like, well, I only run pre-written scenarios. I only run a quick start if there's a pre-written scenario there. But then you have these session zeros and you ask what the players, what's your foundries? And people go, oh, this, and this. And then they create characters who are like, who suddenly in horror games, they hate each other or there's lots of tensions there to play. And again, I love it. Maybe it's that sort of thing where in horror stories, you don't have to like the protagonists. You don't have to like who you're playing. And so getting that meta of like, yeah, you go through that door, bye-bye, means that then I go, oh, well, then I can really push what the true horror is. Because really, when people see like, oh, these people are nasty to each other, they can't see what's coming over. And so as long as the players are okay with that, and again with the lines first, that's how I set the tone out. But I will say, like, there's been times when I've gone, like, sat before a session, and I know what I'm going to do as a GM, and I go, I wonder if this is too far. And I can say this, like, I did my big Solemn Veil one we did for Christmas with the Realms of Peril and Glory. I had this idea of like having a betrayer and then another betrayer that the other betrayer didn't know about, which is a great reveal. Highly recommend Betrayers. But I wanted to do something for when the big bad arrived. And I know we're all recording separately and stuff, and it was late at night. And at a moment, I was like looking on Amazon and I saw like blood capsules. And there was a moment where I thought, if I just buy a blood capsule and just have it and then just break it and it goes over my mouth. And I was like, that's too far because they don't know where I live. They might think something's wrong. So I opted for in the end having my my like eyeliner pen near me and just slowly as I'm talking, just drawing crosses over my eyes.
Oh,
which had the same effect, right? The players were like, "What on earth are you doing?" And of course, I wasn't describing this to the players. I was just saying my monologue. So the audience has no idea why they're reacting in that sort of way. But yeah, that's where I was like, how far can I go? So what I will do, sorry, I'm trying to get around to your question, is that before the game, I'm very much like, is everyone okay? Make sure you got water. Everyone check the lines and fails. Amazing. I try and come over as, as myself, as a really friendly, like caring person. And I say, like, if there's anything in the game, you need to X card it because it's really important. Because then I switch and I will go into that sort of. I don't want to be the Jared Leto, obviously not, but it's that sort of thing where I don't pull my punches unless someone goes, oh, X card, because I hope that people can see that there's absolutely a different character that I am playing, this persona that I'm putting through.
Interesting.
And it's great. Like afterwards when we do the stars and wishes, and I'm just there with crosses over my eyes, just like, a bit of wine, going like, "Oh, you were really good." And they're like, "What the fuck are you doing, Fiona?" Obviously, it depends on group to group, but I always try and make sure they can say when I'm in character as the GM, so that they feel comfortable to push it. Yeah, that's my big long windy answer to that question.
There might be kind of a space for a ritual. You talked a bit about that, of how Die uses that of bringing you in. I wonder if there's an element of if you maybe are more Midwestern and don't have inflection, maybe there's a ritual you could do to be like, all right, like, this is friendly Nathan, and
Mhm.
now I'm putting on my mean Nathan mask,
Mhm.
and now we're
Mhm.
going to play the game. And my
Yeah.
players won't get scared because I can't roll dice for anything. But still,
Oh,
maybe
the dice
it'll
betray
work.
all the time. But like even recently we did a game of Savage Worlds, which I'm editing through now, and it was zombies, and it was
Mhm.
very tense. And again, because of the character creation, I was playing a character who was basically, I can't remember his name in Walking Dead, but the guy that has the baseball bat of Lucille, who's
Oh
just
yeah,
awful, horrible
Negan,
guy.
I think,
Negan,
right?
yeah, exactly. I
yeah.
wanted to play a version of that, and obviously I was checking with players, making sure there was okay. And it came to a point where it's definitely PvP, and at the end, I saw them leave on my horse. And I was like, I ain't having any of that. So I said, like, I just calmly go out, I see them leave, I grab my gun and I pull it, and they were like, oh, who are you going to shoot? And I was like, well, I'm obviously going to shoot my horse. And they went, what? Why are you killing the horse? And again, I did the trigger warnings and stuff like that. But it was like,
Yeah.
that's again because I felt comfortable to do that. Normally, I would not have done that at all, but because I checked the lines and veils and I put across that this person is ruthless, and because these guys had done something, and people were angry with me, but in that sort of way, going like, "Oh, you don't pull your punches even as a player." And so yeah, we keep coming back to this idea of trust with the players. Whether you're teaching RPGs, whether you're running RPGs, it's so important, and that's why I really put that value in like safety tools and stars and wishes and stuff, because it might feel like I'm overdoing it, but honestly, it's just for me, and it keeps everyone safe, so they don't have to see what's inside here. Uh,
Kind of on that trust thing. Is there any advice you can give? I mean, the obvious answer is going to be just play a lot of games and build that communication between people.
mm,
Are there any other like tips you have to? I don't want to say speed it up because that makes it sound like I'm doing like a 100% speed
mm,
run, ultimate trust,
mhm.
something. But any tips for that?
In terms of speeding up, like getting to the good stuff in the game, or like or the character, or like what are you
Kind of
thinking?
more of like, so Holly and Lex and Alex and I, we've all played quite a bit
Mm,
together, so I feel like I can trust them to push
mm,
it, and they'll kind of know from what we've talked about in past games, uh, comfort levels, lines of veils, that sort of thing.
mhm.
Um, and I guess I'm asking, is there any substitute for just putting in the time?
Ooh, interesting. I think if it's with other people, there isn't. So maybe being available to have that separate, like, quick call with someone to be like, hey, let's just iron
Mm.
out what who we are to each other. Again, I go back to that Orbital Blues game. I was playing one of two siblings, and the other person was really keen that we have a established backstory of what we were doing. And so I had an hour call with them, and it was very productive. It actually helped a lot in what because I saw the relationship in one way, but actually they didn't see it like that, and it was great because then we could iron out
Ah,
exactly what we were to each other. But then I guess for me as a player, if for whatever reason you can't do group um, session zeros, or you're coming into it,
mhm.
make the choice. I would say this as a player: make the choice that you know someone, you already know them, and it's been 6 months, and that's enough, like
Yeah.
the minimum sort of thing, because you're not having to do like, oh, hello, I'm so and so, like even if it's just a tangible, like, oh well, I was on the same caravan, and oh, I've seen you before. You did a really cool thing. What did you do with that candle? That again, making it
Ah,
up, but like I think just cutting to it that you already know the person and you
yeah.
already have an opinion about that person. Ideally, that opinion should be positive, because it's very hard to get annoyed with people if because then we're not going into those improv shouting matches of like, well, you're wrong or something. You can have
Yeah.
rivals, frenemies, but if you like someone, oh, people get really shocked when you go, oh, you're so good. You did the thing with the sword, amazing. You're like, oh, you're clearly making fun of me. No, no,
Yeah.
you did a really cool thing with your sword. I wish I was as good as you. Ha. You know what? It's it's a Ted Lasso effect. 100% the Ted Lasso
Oh,
effect.
okay.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Because again, you have those British people go, "Why are you so nice? You must be up to something." It's like, no, I am a genuine Midwestern person. So yeah,
We're not that nice.
no. Well, it's a fictionalized version of it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little bit of to be the improv high status, low status sort of play, right?
100%, 100%. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, the others are sick of me. Anyways, I want to hear a bit about your other projects because you've got a lot of projects, and I think we should kind of lightning round of
Yes.
talk about them.
Mhm.
I think RP Geeks
Mhm.
is the first one on my list. What's RP Geeks?
Great question. So RP Geeks is a nerdy TTRPG show in which we do like extraordinary stories and fascinating facts. So myself, my two co-hosts, Sharmini Bundell and Emily Bates, we run different RPG systems that interest us. And our sort of USP is that both Sharmini and Emily are science communicators, and more importantly, I am not. And what we like to do is like do a little segment at the break called a lore drop, where we try and find something about the TTRPG that we're playing, and then like do a cool like a bit of a lightning round of fun facts, but also lore stuff. And they do it from a more of a science a view of things. I do it from any other view I can find. Like, and it
That's
doesn't matter
cool.
what the system it is. We did Paranoia, the Bachelor version for Valentine's Day. I did a lore drop on reality TV shows and how certain things get made and what you might have to think about when you're making a reality TV show, for example. Blaze in the Dark, I talked about crows recently, which is great. And yeah, like again, it doesn't matter what the system is. We did Nibiru, we did Mapamundi, which is like this ecological thing.
Mhm.
Something that interests us about, again, it's that sort of Wikipedia hole. And yeah, people seem to like it. So yeah, if you want to have like cool RPG stuff, but also a little bit of facts, like almost like no such thing as a fish facts that you can tell your colleagues at work the next day, go and check out the RP Geeks. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I see you've even played Blood on the Clock Tower, which
Oh, well,
that's a
that's a
board
different.
game. That's a
That's
board game,
that's a
I'm pretty
social
sure.
deduction game where you get to lie and murder your friends. I can highly recommend, but I am terrible at it, and I'm always shocked when no one suspects me lying, because I'm a bad liar.
Awesome. You also have a couple of D&D if you're into that.
Hmm.
You have your book club,
Mm.
a traveling book club, and is there a third one coming up, or am
We're
I?
gonna yes,
No.
we're doing a GM's book club as well. Yeah, so the DM's book club is like if you're like I only care about the big dragons and dungeons. Although after the news about Sigil closing, I don't know if you will be anymore.
Yeah.
But we do a weekly book club where we take a bit of D&D lore and see what we like about it, and if we could improve it in some way and put it into
Mhm.
our games, because obviously we know that is the big one that people get drawn into when they first play TTRPGs. We read the books so you don't have to, and we do stuff from settings. We do like small like character things. We even like do a little bit of world building, and sometimes we run a game or two. But it's always just something that interests us. Again, that sort of nerdy fact thing, and then going like, this could be great if we did this, this, and this. We don't hold back. So yeah, if you're interested in that, we also talk a lot about other RPGs on it, more RPGs in it. That's why we're doing this sort of the GM's book club as a way. And yeah, the travel book club, I'll just say that is basically us going around the different planes of existence, because we enjoy Planescape, we enjoy like sort of
Mhm.
like traveling a little bit. So we thought we'd go and have a look at the outer planes and inner planes. And so yeah, so you can go get a bit of lore on that and see like what if you would take your players there, regardless of the system. So yeah, that's the DM's book club.
Plane of Fire. No. Just
No, it's the
no.
plane of ooze you want to go to, the horrible,
Oh.
horrible ooze plane. Absolutely.
Like that. And then what am I rolling? You're doing one shots?
Yeah, so we one of my rolling is a twice monthly tabletop RPG one shot podcast where we do lots of different sort of one shots and like limited series of systems, but also interviews with game designers as well. We're doing a couple of streams as well. We try and do streams every month. Again, just again trying out new systems, and they can be about world building, they can be solo games, all sorts of things. And yeah, we've got our Savage Worlds one coming out very very soon as well. So yeah, those are all the projects. Feels like I'm doing lots, but honestly, it's just I'm lucky to have the time to work on my passions. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. And definitely check out the TLDR TTRPG streaming on YouTube and
Yes,
Twitch.
YouTube on Twitch for the foreseeable future. Yeah, if you're in doubt, just go to the What Am I Rolling YouTube channel, and the whole backlog of stuff is there. I'm trying to get a regular schedule, but if you just subscribe, I'm sure any
Yeah.
ones that sort of pop up there, you can go and check out. So,
Yeah, you've really put like a few weeks out too, so you can
yeah. Hmm.
look and see. I know like Triangle Agency was out for a couple weeks, so I just got to be
You were
there
ready
rubbing
for
my
it, yeah.
going like, oh yeah.
Let's go, yeah,
I'm
exactly,
not going
exactly.
into work this morning. I'll
Oh,
just
oh no.
I'll sit in the home office so I can do other things. We hope these insidious whispers are helpful in addressing this topic at your table. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to things we discussed in this episode, like actual plays, any RPG resources we can share, and an invite to our lab's Discord to discuss more reanimations and consultations. We also post these episodes and resources to our Patreon that's free to follow, or if you like, you can make a charitable donation to help keep the ominously flickering lights on at the H. West Memorial Mortuary and Laboratories. Fiona, anything you would like to plug here?
Come check out What Am I Rolling and the DM's Book Club wherever you listen to podcasts. RP Geeks are all on YouTube. And yeah, no, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. And yeah, hopefully my ramblings have inspired people to at least try horror gaming for a little bit. And yeah, just have fun. That's all I say.
Thanks for coming by. This was great fun.
Yeah, thank you very
Yes,
much.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
So until next time.
Thanks for listening to RPG Reanimators.
Where your games can die.
Or live.
On the table.
Oh no, he's doing the Midwest thing. Oh no, oh no.
That non-verbal
no.
cue there. Oh no.